You think you know what it means to be alpha? To stand at the top while everyone beneath you sharpens their knives? King Veilor Draven built an empire with blood and steel, conquered every enemy who dared breathe his name. But power doesn't care about your victories. It only cares about what you're willing to sacrifice when the throne itself becomes the trap. This is the story of a king who had everything and lost it all in a single choice. Stay with me until the end. Like this video and drop your city in the comments. Let me know where my tribe is watching from. The storm broke 3 days before the betrayal. Veilor Draven stood on the war balcony of the Obsidian Fortress, watching lightning crack the sky above the capital like the spine of some dying god. Rain hammered the gold-veined towers, turning the streets below into rivers of black water and reflected torchlight. The empire he'd carved from the throats of weaker men stretched beyond the horizon. 15 provinces, 40 cities, uncounted villages that bent their knees or burned. He'd taken it all, every inch of it, not inherited, not gifted, taken. His hands gripped the stone railing, knuckles white. The scar across his left palm, a reminder of the blood oath he'd sworn to himself at 16, pulled tight in the cold. That was the year he'd killed his first man. Not in battle. In an alley, with a rusted blade, because the man had tried to take what little food Veilor had left. He'd learned the truth that night, the one that shaped every decision since. The world doesn't give. It takes. And if you want to survive, you take first. Behind him, the throne room doors opened. Heavy boots on marble. He didn't turn. General Thrace, his voice gravel and old campaigns, built like a siege tower, scarred like a battlefield. The only man in the Empire who'd seen Veilor at his weakest and never looked away. Tell me. Veilor's voice cut through the storm. Thrace stopped 10 feet back. Protocol. Even loyalty kept its distance from a king. The council convenes in an hour. They're demanding an answer. As if choices were simple. As if ruling meant pointing at a map and saying, "This is mine. Let them demand." Thrace shifted. The kind of shift that meant he had more to say and didn't want to say it. "Spit it out, General. The Queen has recalled her personal guard from the eastern garrison. All 40 of them. They arrived this morning." Veilor's jaw tightened. Serlith moved pieces like she moved everything. Quietly. Precisely. 3 steps ahead. She'd been doing it since the day they'd met on a battlefield where she'd negotiated the surrender of a city he'd been ready to burn. She'd saved 10,000 lives that day and earned his respect. Later, his trust. Eventually, something that looked like love but felt more like partnership. And Naira? Still under house confinement. Her people are restless. Of course they were. Nira Voss didn't breed followers who sat quietly. She bred wolves. People who'd followed her out of the northern wastes because she'd promised them something Veilor's empire never had. A voice. Not submission. Participation. He'd met her 8 months ago during the Winter March campaign. She'd ridden into his war camp alone. No banners, no guards. Just a woman on a black horse with eyes like forged steel. She'd called him a tyrant to his face in front of his entire command staff. Half of them had reached for their swords. He'd laughed. Actually laughed. It had been years since anyone surprised him. "What do you want?" he'd asked. "To see if the legend matches the man," she'd said. He'd given her a tent, a meal, and a challenge. Prove I'm wrong. She'd stayed. And everything had started breaking. Veilor turned from the balcony. Rain dripped from his black coat, pooled on the stone. Thrace stood at attention, but his eyes, those eyes had seen too much to hide concern. "You think I'm losing control?" It wasn't a question. Thrace met his gaze. Old loyalty. The kind that tells the truth even when it hurts. "I think you're at war with yourself, and that's a fight no king can win." The words landed like a blade between ribs. Clean, deep. Veilor crossed the space between them, stopped close enough to see the weathered lines around Thrace's eyes, the gray threading through his beard. This man had held the line when the Eastern Rebellion nearly broke them. Had executed traitors without hesitation, had never once questioned an order, until now. "You've known me 15 years, Thrace. You've seen me do things that would make demons flinch. You've never doubted me before. I don't doubt your strength. I doubt your heart. The Empire doesn't run on hearts. No, it runs on fear, and fear is breaking." Vialor stepped back. The throne room stretched behind them, vast, cold, decorated with the banners of conquered kingdoms and the bones of failed rebellions. 30 feet above, the chandelier of black iron and dragon glass cast shadows that looked like grasping hands. The Crimson Council. 1 hour. He walked away from Thrace, from the balcony, from the storm. His boots echoed in the emptiness. "You can't avoid this forever," Thrace called after him. Vialor stopped at the threshold of his private chambers. "Watch me." Machat. The queen's wings smelled like winter roses and old parchment. Serelith stood before the war table, a massive slab of dark wood carved with the Empire's territories. Candles burned at each corner, maps covered every surface. She moved between them like a dancer, her fingers tracing supply lines, garrison positions, political alliances. She wore gray, always gray, the color of stone, of permanence, of things that outlast fire. She didn't look up when he entered. "You've been on that balcony for 3 hours." Her voice carried no warmth, no accusation, just observation. That was Serelith. She didn't fight with emotion. She fought with reality. Valor closed the door. The room felt smaller than it should, despite its size. Every conversation with her lately felt like walking through a trap-rigged hallway. "I was thinking about her." He didn't answer, didn't need to. Serelith finally looked at him. Her face was beautiful in the way a sword is beautiful. Elegant, dangerous, purposeful. Dark hair pulled back in a severe braid, eyes the color of winter ice. No softness. She'd killed softness in herself years ago, the same way he'd killed doubt. "The council will demand you choose," she said. "They're calling it a crisis of leadership. Let them call it what they want." She moved around the table toward him, each step measured. When she spoke again, her voice dropped to something almost gentle. Almost. "Do you remember the siege of Krell?" He remembered. A city that had held out for 6 months. Starvation, disease, desperation. He'd offered terms. They'd refused. So he'd waited. Watched them eat their horses, then their dogs, then things he didn't let himself think about. When they finally opened the gates, there was nothing left to conquer but ghosts. "You were the one who convinced me to wait," she continued. "You said mercy is just slow cruelty, that a king who hesitates loses respect. Do you still believe that?" He knew where this was going, could see the architecture of her argument taking shape. "This isn't Krell." "No, it's worse, because this time the enemy isn't at the gates. She's in your bed." Valor's hand went to the knife at his belt. Old habit. Serelith didn't flinch. "Careful, my queen." She stepped closer, near enough that he could smell the rose oil she wore, see the tiny scar above her left eyebrow from the night assassins had come for her 5 years ago. He'd killed 3 of them himself. She'd killed the 4th. "I built this empire with you," she said quietly. "I gave up everything, my name, my family, my chance at anything resembling a normal life. I became the ghost behind your throne because I believed in what we were creating. Order, stability, power that would outlast us both. You did. And now you're willing to burn it all for what? A woman who's been here less than a year? Who brings chaos wherever she walks? She brings change. Change is just another word for destruction when you're standing at the top." She turned back to the war table, hands splayed across the maps. "The northern provinces are already fracturing. Lord Davin has been in contact with Nyra's people. So has General Korvax. If you legitimize her, if you choose her over me, you're not choosing love. You're choosing civil war." The words hung in the air like an execution order. Valor moved to the window. Outside, the storm had settled into steady rain. The city sprawled below. Thousands of buildings, hundreds of thousands of lives. All of them depending on him to be strong, to be certain, to be unbreakable. "What if the Empire needs to break?" he said. Silence. Then, "You don't mean that." He turned to face her. "I've spent 20 years building cages, Serelith. Stronger cages, bigger cages, cages made of gold and glory. But they're still cages. What if everything we built is just a monument to fear?" Her eyes flashed. Actual emotion, rare and dangerous. Fear keeps people alive. Hope gets them killed. Does it? Or does fear just make them wait for someone brave enough to break the chains? "You sound like her. Maybe she's right." Serelith's composure cracked. Just for a second, but he saw it. The tightness around her mouth, the way her fingers curled into fists. If you choose her, I won't stand aside quietly. I've given too much. I know. Then you know what happens next. He did. War. Betrayal. The Empire tearing itself apart. Everything they'd built becoming kindling for a fire neither of them could control. The Crimson Council, she said. 1 hour. They'll ask you to denounce her, publicly, to reaffirm your commitment to stability. And if I don't, then we find out how loyal your generals really are. She walked past him, stopped at the door. I loved you, Valor. Maybe I still do. But I love this empire more, and I will not watch you destroy it for a fantasy. The door closed. He was alone with the maps, the candles, the weight of every decision he'd ever made. Nyra's chambers were smaller than the Queen's, colder, less decorated. She'd refused most of the luxuries offered to her, said she didn't come here to live in comfort. She came to live honestly. She stood by the narrow window when the guards let him in. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders, dark red, like dried blood in firelight. She wore simple clothes, no jewels, no symbols of status. She told him once that titles were just leashes people put on themselves to feel important. She didn't turn when he entered. They're going to make you choose. Her voice carried the rough edges of someone who'd grown up fighting for every word. I know. And you came here to what? Warn me? Apologize? Tell me it was fun while it lasted? He crossed to her, stood close enough to feel the heat of her. She smelled like wood smoke and winter air. I came because I needed to see something real. She finally turned. Her eyes were green, sharp, alive with something he'd forgotten how to name. Not submission, not calculation, just presence. Full, unflinching presence. You want real? Real is that you're terrified. Real is that you've spent so long being the monster that you don't know how to be the man anymore. The words should have felt like an attack. They felt like relief. Tell me what you see when you look at me. She reached up, put her hand on his chest, over his heart. The scar tissue underneath, the old wounds that never fully healed. I see someone who survived by becoming what hurt him. I see a man who learned that love is weakness and power is safety. I see a king who built an empire to fill the hole where his humanity used to be. He wanted to look away, couldn't. And that's supposed to inspire me to choose you? She smiled, sad, knowing. I'm not asking you to choose me. I'm asking you to choose yourself. The version of yourself you could be if you stopped running. What if that version loses everything? Then you lose it honestly instead of protecting a lie. Behind her, through the window, the city glittered. Rain-slicked streets, torches fighting the dark. Thousands of people who'd never know his name, who'd live and die in the shadow of choices he made in rooms like this. They're calling you dangerous, he said, saying you've poisoned my mind against the Empire. Have I? He didn't answer. She stepped back, created distance. You know what the difference is between me and Sarilith? She wants to preserve what you built. I want to burn it down and see what grows from the ashes. Not because I hate what you made, because I believe you're capable of something better. The Empire is a machine that runs on crushing anything that doesn't fit. How long before it crushes you too? A knock at the door. Heavy, official. Your Majesty. The council awaits. Nyra's eyes never left his. Go be their king, Valor. Make the choice that keeps everything intact. But know this, I've seen what's underneath the crown, and it's worth more than all of this. He turned to leave. Valor. He stopped. Whatever you decide in that room, don't lie to yourself about why. If you choose her because you believe fear is the only thing that works. If you choose me because you're ready to find out what else is possible. But don't choose because you're scared. The door opened. Thrace stood outside, armor gleaming, face grim. Time. Valor walked past him without a word. The Crimson Council met in the Hall of Echoes, a circular chamber where every whisper carried, every lie resonated. 40 nobles, 20 generals, 10 high merchants. The power structure of the empire seated in concentric rings around a single throne. Valor's throne. But tonight he didn't sit. He stood in the center under the chandelier of black iron while they circled like sharks. Lord Varen spoke first, tall, thin, aristocratic, old money and older grudges. Your Majesty, We gather in crisis. The stability you've built over 2 decades faces unprecedented threat, not from external forces, but from within. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. General Korvax rose. Built like a warhammer, voice like rolling thunder. He'd won the southern campaigns, crushed the rebel lords, earned his position through blood. The men speak in the barracks. They question whether their king's judgment has been compromised by personal entanglements. Lady Marith, merchant queen of the coastal provinces, sharp as a blade hidden in silk. Trade routes are destabilizing. Our partners in the eastern kingdoms ask if we can guarantee continuity of leadership. They use words like distracted, unfocused, weak. Each accusation landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading. Vaelor turned slowly, meeting eyes around the circle. He knew each of them, knew their ambitions, their fears, their price. He'd bought some, broken others, but respected all of them enough to keep them close. Say what you came to say, Varen. The Lord stood straighter. Denounce Lady Nyra Voss. Publicly. Reaffirm your commitment to the Queen and the stability she represents. Do this, and the Empire holds. Refuse, and we cannot guarantee loyalty. Cannot guarantee loyalty. The prettiest threat Vaelor had heard all week. Who else stands with Varen? 30 hands rose. Nobles, merchants, generals, not everyone, but enough to matter. And who stands with me regardless of my choice? 10 hands, Thrace among them. The true believers, the ones who'd followed him through hell and never looked back. The rest stayed seated, hands down, waiting to see which way the wind blew. This is the foundation of empires, Vaelor thought. Not loyalty, not honor, just cold calculation dressed up as duty. He walked to the throne, turned to face them all. You speak of stability, of preserving what we've built. But let me ask you something. How many of you remember what it cost to build this empire? Silence. He gestured to General Korvax. You slaughtered the garrison at Holdfast because they wouldn't surrender. 200 men, women, children in the barracks, remember? Korvax's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. Vaelor pointed to Lady Marith. You financed the purge of the Merchants Guild when they opposed our trade policies. 87 throats slit in one night. Your gold, their blood. Her face stayed neutral, but her hands gripped the armrests. He turned to Lord Varen. And you, Varen. You betrayed your own brother to secure your position in this council. Gave me the evidence I needed to have him executed for treason. Your own blood. Varen's composure cracked. The Empire required monsters. And we became them. Every one of us. We built this on brutality and called it necessity. On fear and called it strength. And now you stand here demanding I choose between preserving that system or evolving beyond it. This isn't about evolution. Sirlith's voice cut through the chamber. She'd been sitting in the shadows, but now she rose. This is about survival. The world doesn't care about your crisis of conscience. It cares about power, and power demands certainty. She walked into the center, stood beside him, but not with him. You taught me that, Vaelor. On the walls of Krell, in the aftermath of the rebellion, through every hard choice that built this empire. You said that a king who wavers is a king who falls. She turned to face the council. I say we put it to a vote. Here. Now. The king chooses the queen and the empire, or he chooses the outsider and chaos. No. The word came from Thrace. He stepped forward, hand on his sword hilt. With respect, my queen, the king's personal life is not subject to council vote. His political alliances are, Korvax countered, and when his personal life threatens political stability, it becomes our concern. The chamber erupted. Voices overlapping, accusations flying, ancient rivalries surfacing under the pressure. Vaelor watched it all. The machine he'd built, the people he'd elevated, the empire he'd bled for. All of it fracturing because he'd done the one thing a king wasn't supposed to do. He'd started asking questions. The doors burst open. A messenger, young, terrified, covered in rain and mud. Your Majesty. The room fell silent. The eastern garrison. It's under attack. Lord Davin has declared independence. He's marching on the capital with 12,000 men. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Impossible, Varen breathed. Davin is loyal. Was loyal, the messenger corrected. He sends word that he no longer recognizes your authority. claims the throne has been compromised. Serlith's voice cut through the shock. This is what happens when a king loses focus. When personal desire overrides political necessity. Davin saw weakness and exploited it. She turned to Valor. Choose, now. End this. The council waited. 40 pairs of eyes. 40 different calculations of loyalty and survival. Valor looked at Thrace. The old general gave the smallest shake of his head, not telling him what to do, just acknowledging the trap. He thought of Naira in her chambers. Choose yourself, she'd said. But what if choosing himself meant destroying everything he'd built? What if the cost of honesty was the empire itself? What if Serlith was right? What if fear really was the only thing that worked? Thunder rolled outside. Lightning flashed through the high windows, throwing shadows across the council chamber. In that moment, Valor Draven understood the cruelest truth of power. The higher you climb, the less you're allowed to be human. He opened his mouth to speak. The doors exploded inward, guards flew backward, steel sang, screams erupted. Through the smoke and chaos, a figure emerged, hooded, armed, moving with lethal precision. The assassin's blade flashed toward Serlith. Valor moved without thinking. Old instinct, muscle memory from 1,000 battles. He threw himself between the blade and the queen. Metal bit into his shoulder, hot pain, blood blooming across his coat. Thrace's sword took the assassin's head off before the body hit the ground. Silence. Ringing ears, the smell of blood and burning metal. Valor looked down. The wound wasn't deep, but it was enough. Red spreading across black fabric. He looked at Serlith. She stood frozen, eyes wide. Not with fear, with something else. Understanding. You saved me, she whispered. Always. But not because you love me, because if I die, the empire falls apart, and you lose your excuse. The words landed like the assassin's blade had, clean, deep, true. No. She stepped back. You love her, Valor. You already made your choice. Your body made it before your mind could catch up. The council watched, every eye marking the moment. The instant the facade finally cracked. Valor's hand went to the wound, blood between his fingers. He'd bled for this empire 100 times. But this felt different. This felt like the beginning of the end. Serlith turned to the council. Arrest Lady Naira Voss, charge her with conspiracy to commit regicide, find everyone connected to her faction, and bring them to the dungeons. No, Valor said. You don't have that authority. She looked at him with eyes like winter. Watch me. Guards moved. Korvax gave orders. The machine of empire grinding into motion. And Valor stood in the center of it all, bleeding, watching everything he'd built prepare to devour the one person who'd made him feel human. The choice had been made, just not the one he wanted. Key. They dragged Naira into the throne room in chains. She didn't struggle, didn't scream, just walked between the guards with her head high, eyes burning. The council had reconvened, larger now, more nobles, more generals, all of them hungry for blood. Serlith stood beside the throne. Valor sat in it, bandaged, exhausted, trapped. The charges are clear, Serlith announced. Conspiracy, treason, attempted assassination of the queen. Lies, Naira said. Every word. Evidence was presented. Letters bearing her seal, testimony from captured conspirators, money trails leading back to her people. All of it fabricated. Valor could see the architecture of the lie. Serlith's precision, her ruthlessness. She'd built the perfect trap, and he'd walked right into it. What say you, King Valor? Serlith's voice was formal, distant. Does the evidence warrant execution? The word hung in the air. Execution. Naira looked at him. Not pleading, not begging, just looking, seeing. You know this is a lie, she said quietly. You know I didn't do this. He did know. But the evidence was there, the council was watching. And if he showed weakness now, if he chose her over stability, the empire would fracture. Davin's rebellion would grow. Other provinces would follow. Civil war. Exactly as Serlith had predicted. Tell them the truth, Naira said. Be the man I saw, not the king they made you. Valor's hands gripped the armrests. The throne felt like a cage, the crown like a noose. He looked at Serlith. She waited, patient, certain. He looked at Thrace. The general's face was unreadable. He looked at the council. 40 faces. 40 calculations. 40 people who would betray him the second he showed weakness. He looked at Naira, and he made the choice. The evidence is clear. Her eyes widened, just slightly. The charges stand. Lady Naira Voss, you are guilty of conspiracy and treason against the crown. No. The word barely escaped her lips. The sentence is death, to be carried out at dawn. The council erupted in approval. Justice served, stability preserved, the empire safe. Naira didn't cry, didn't rage. She just looked at him with something worse than hatred. Disappointment. You're a coward, she said. The words cut deeper than any blade. Guards, take her to the cells. They dragged her away. She didn't struggle, just kept her eyes on him until the doors closed. The throne room emptied. Nobles filing out, satisfied. Generals nodding approval. The machine functioning smoothly again. Only Sarilith remained. She approached the throne. You made the right choice. He didn't answer. The empire is secure. Davin's rebellion will collapse without her to rally around. Order is restored. Still nothing. She leaned close, close enough that only he could hear. I know you hate me right now. That's fine. Hate me. But you'll thank me when you're still on that throne 10 years from now, when the empire still stands, when history remembers you as the king who never broke. She walked away, and Valor sat alone on his throne, in his empire, with his power intact, completely alone. Outside, dawn was breaking. In a few hours, they would execute Naira. Justice would be served. The example would be set. The empire would survive. And the man who'd saved it would be dead too. Just no one would notice, because some deaths don't need swords. King. The cells beneath the palace smelled like old blood and broken promises. Valor walked them alone. No guards, no witnesses. Just him and the stone and the darkness. Naira sat in the far corner of her cell, hands still chained, face bruised from the arrest, but her eyes still burning. He stopped outside the bars. Neither spoke. Finally, I came to explain. Don't. I had to choose the empire. You had to choose fear. The empire runs on fear. I know. That's why I wanted to help you burn it down. He gripped the bars. If I'd chosen you, civil war, thousands dead, everything we built destroyed. And now? Now the empire survives. She laughed, bitter, broken. You think this is survival? You just murdered the only part of yourself worth saving. You saved nothing. You traded your soul for a lie. Sarilith will tighten her grip. The council will demand more. And you'll give it to them because that's what kings do. They sacrifice pieces of themselves until there's nothing left but the crown. That's the job. No, the job is to lead, to inspire, to make people believe in something better than fear. But you can't do that anymore, because you don't believe it yourself. Silence. Then Naira stood, walked to the bars, close enough that he could see the tears she refused to let fall. You want to know the worst part? I don't blame you. The empire did this. Sarilith did this. The world did this. They made you into someone who can't afford to be human. I never asked for... You took it anyway. You built this cage, Valor, and now you're locked inside it with the rest of us. Dawn was coming. The executioner would arrive soon. Is there anything I can give you? He asked. Any comfort? She smiled, sad, final. Yeah. When they write the history books, when they talk about the great King Valor, who built an empire that lasted 1,000 years, make sure they mention this moment. Make sure they know that you had a chance to be something better, and you chose to be a king instead. She turned away. He stood there a long time, waiting for her to turn back, for some sign that forgiveness was possible. She never did. He walked back through the dungeons, up the stairs, into the palace. The throne room was empty, dawn light streaming through the high windows. He sat on his throne and waited for history to start. But history had other plans. The explosion came at dawn. The eastern wall of the palace erupted in fire and stone. Screams echoed through the corridors. Bells rang. Guards scrambled. Valor ran to the war balcony. Below, chaos. Soldiers pouring through the breach, not Davin's colors. Different banners, red and black. Naira's faction. They'd come for her. Thrace appeared at his side. We're under attack. A coordinated assault. They knew exactly where to strike. How many? 500, maybe more. Led by Commander Reich, Nyra's second, the one she'd brought from the north. Valor's mind raced. This changed everything. If her people could mount this kind of operation, if they had this kind of organization, she wasn't lying. Thrace looked at him. About what? The conspiracy. The assassination. She didn't do it. Sarilith framed her. The words came out certain, final. How do you know? Because Nyra would never be this stupid. She'd never leave evidence. She'd never get caught. If she wanted me dead, I'd already be dead. Thrace's face hardened. Then who? Sarilith's voice cut through the dawn. She stood in the doorway, calm, composed. You figured it out. It wasn't a question. Valor turned. You orchestrated everything. The assassination attempt, the evidence, the framing. She smiled. Small. Satisfied. I protected the Empire. You manipulated me. I saved you from yourself. She walked onto the balcony. Below, the battle raged, steel on steel, fire spreading. You were losing focus, she continued. Becoming weak. That woman was poison. She made you question everything we built, because maybe it deserves to be questioned. And that's exactly why she had to go. Kings don't question. They act. They decide. They rule. Valor's hand went to his sword. You tried to kill me. No, I tried to kill her. You got in the way. That wasn't the plan. What was the plan? Simple. Frame her, execute her, remove the distraction, then guide you back to being the king the Empire needs. And if I refuse to execute her? Sarilith's smile vanished. Then the Council would remove you both. I'd take the throne. The Empire would survive. You planned a coup. I planned for survival. There's a difference. Below, the battle shifted. Nyra's forces were pushing deeper. The palace guard was fracturing. You'll never make it, Sarilith said. Even if you save her now, even if you expose me, the Council will side with stability, with me. I've spent years building those relationships. You spent 8 months infatuated with a fantasy. He drew his sword. She didn't flinch. You won't kill me. You're not capable of it anymore. She already made you soft. Wrong. He pressed the blade to her throat. I'm capable of anything. I just finally understand the cost. Thunder outside, lightning illuminating the carnage below. Sarilith's eyes never wavered. If you kill me, you prove you're the monster I always knew you were. If you spare me, you prove you're weak. Either way, you lose. Maybe. But at least I'll lose honestly. He lowered the sword. Guards, arrest the queen. Thrace hesitated. Just for a second. You're sure? I'm sure. Men moved. Sarilith didn't resist, just looked at Valor with something like pity. You think this saves you? This just starts the real war. Then let it start. She was led away, and Valor stood on the balcony, watching his empire burn, and felt more alive than he had in years, because for the first time since he'd taken the crown, he'd made a choice that was his, not the Empire's, not the Council's, not fear's. The palace burned in 3 places by the time Valor reached the dungeons. Smoke filled the corridors. Stone cracked from heat. Somewhere above, the east wing was collapsing. He could hear it, the groan of ancient architecture giving way, the screams of people trapped in rooms that had stood for centuries. History burning, literally. Thrace ran beside him, sword drawn, face grim. Reich's forces have breached the inner courtyard. They're carving through the palace guard like paper. How long until they reach the cells? Minutes. Maybe less. They rounded a corner. 3 of Sarilith's personal guard blocked the stairs. Not standing down, not surrendering, loyal to the end, or just terrified of what happened to traitors in this empire. Stand aside, Valor ordered. The captain, a scarred veteran named Torvin, raised his sword. We have orders from the Queen. No one passes. The Queen is under arrest for treason. Torvin's face stayed stone. We don't recognize that authority. Then you die for it. The words came out flat. No anger, no hesitation, just fact. Thrace moved first. His blade took the guard on the left through the throat before the man could raise his shield. Valor went right, disarmed the second guard with a strike to the wrist, drove his pommel into the man's temple. The guard dropped. Torvin fought. Actually fought. Met Valor's strikes with practiced precision. This wasn't some green recruit. This was a man who'd earned his position through blood. But Valor had built an empire on being better at violence than everyone else. He feinted high, went low, opened Torvin's guard. His blade found the gap between breastplate and hip, deep, fatal. Torvin went down, blood pooling on stone that had seen too much of it already. Valor didn't stop, didn't look back. Down the stairs, through the corridors, past cells filled with forgotten men who'd once threatened his rule. The empire runs on fear, yes, but also on the willingness to do what others won't, to make the choices that haunt you, to become the monster so others don't have to. That's what Sarilith never understood. She thought power was about control, about systems and leverage and calculated moves. But real power, the kind that reshapes worlds, comes from being willing to burn everything down and stand in the ashes, even if those ashes include pieces of yourself. Nyra's cell door hung open. Empty. Gone. Thrace cursed. Reich got here first. Valor's mind raced. If they'd already extracted her, if she was already moving toward the exit, the courtyard. They'll try to escape through the northern breach. They ran. Behind them, the palace shook. Another explosion. Closer this time. The northern courtyard was a war zone. Bodies everywhere. Palace guard. Nyra's fighters. Nobles caught in the crossfire. Blood mixed with rain on cobblestones that had once hosted royal ceremonies. Now they hosted slaughter. In the center, surrounded by her people, Nyra stood free. Chains broken. Sword in hand. Alive. Their eyes met across the carnage. For a second, everything stopped. The battle faded. The screams went silent, just her and him and the space between them that might as well have been a canyon. Then Reich stepped forward. Massive, brutal, loyal to Nyra like Thrace was loyal to Valor. Mirror images of dedication. Stand down, King. You don't have the numbers. He was right. Reich had 40 fighters. Valor had Thrace and maybe a dozen palace guards still standing. The math was simple. Nyra raised her hand. Her forces stopped advancing. Let him approach. She said it quiet, but everyone heard. That was her gift. She didn't need to shout. People listened because she spoke truth, not orders. Valor walked forward, alone. Unarmed now, he'd sheathed his sword. An act of trust or suicide. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. He stopped 5 feet from her. Up close, she looked different. Harder. The softness he'd seen in her chambers was gone, replaced by something forged in the last 6 hours. Betrayal did that. It either broke you or made you iron. She'd chosen iron. You came, she said. I came. Why? Because Sarilith lied. Because I was wrong. Because you finally grew a spine? The words cut, but he took them. Yes. She laughed, sharp, bitter. You sentenced me to death. You looked me in the eyes and chose fear over truth. And now you want what? Forgiveness? Understanding? No, I want to fix it. You can't fix this. You broke something that doesn't heal. Around them, her fighters shifted, hands on weapons, waiting for the word. Valor's throat tightened. This was it. The moment where everything collapsed or transformed. No middle ground. No safe choice. I know what I did. I know what I am. But I also know Sarilith orchestrated everything. The assassination attempt. The evidence? All of it designed to make me choose between you and stability. And you chose stability. I chose wrong. Nyra stepped closer, close enough that he could see the bruises on her wrists from the chains, the cut above her eye from the arrest. You want to know what I learned in that cell? Waiting to die because you were too scared to trust yourself? Tell me that you're exactly what they made you. A king who can't afford to be human. A man so terrified of losing power that he'll sacrifice anything to keep it. Is that what you believe? It's what I saw. Then you didn't look hard enough. He reached for her hand. She pulled back. Don't. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to prove I can be better than what they made me. She searched his face, looking for the lie, the manipulation, the angle. Found none, because there wasn't one. For the first time in 20 years, Valor Draven was standing in front of someone without armor, without calculation, without the weight of empire forcing his words into shapes that served a purpose. Just him, raw, honest, terrified. Reich moved forward. "Naira, we need to leave. The palace guard is regrouping. If we stay, we're trapped." She didn't look away from Valor. "What happens if I stay? If I give you this chance? War." Serilith won't go quietly. The council will fracture. Some will follow me, some will follow her. The empire will tear itself apart, so nothing changes. Just a different tyrant on the throne. No. Everything changes. Because I'm done building cages. I'm done ruling through fear. I want to create something that doesn't require people to surrender their humanity to survive. Pretty words. Got anything to back them up? He gestured to the burning palace. "I just arrested the queen, exposed her conspiracy, chose you over stability. I'd say that's a start. Or it's just trading one woman for another. Same king, different crown." The accusation landed hard. Because it was fair. How many times had men in power claimed a change while the system stayed the same? Then help me prove otherwise. Don't run. Don't start a rebellion. Stay. Fight with me, not against me. Show me how to build something better. And if you fail, if the old patterns reassert themselves, then you were right, and I burn with the empire I built. Silence. Rain fell harder. Fire crackled in the east wing. Somewhere, stone crashed as another section of the palace collapsed. "This is insane," Reich said. "We have the advantage. We can extract, regroup, come back stronger." Nira finally looked away from Valor, met Reich's eyes. "Stand down." "Commander?" I said, "Stand down." The big man's jaw worked. Every instinct screaming at him to get her out, get her safe. But loyalty meant obeying even when you disagreed. He stepped back. Nira turned to her forces. "Lower your weapons. We're not leaving." Confusion rippled through the ranks. They'd come to rescue her. Now she was staying with the man who'd sentenced her to death. But they obeyed. Because that's what you did when you followed Nira Voss. You trusted, even when it made no sense. She looked back at Valor. "One chance. You fail, you hesitate, you choose the crown over the truth, even once. I'm gone. And next time, I won't come back." "Understood." And Serilith? Tried for treason, publicly, no backroom deals, no political theater, real justice. She'll fight. I know. The council will resist, let them. You're talking about civil war. I'm talking about rebirth. Nira studied him, then, slowly, extended her hand. He took it. Their fingers intertwined, scarred hands, battle-worn. Both of them had killed, lied, sacrificed pieces of themselves to survive. But maybe that was the point. You couldn't build something new without understanding what the old cost. You couldn't choose better without knowing what worse looked like. Thrace appeared at Valor's side. "Sire, the council is convening. Emergency session. They're demanding your presence. Let them demand. They're threatening to declare you unfit to rule. Then I'll give them a reason to try." He released Naira's hand, turned to address both groups, hers and his, the palace guard who remained, Naira's fighters, all of them bloodied, exhausted, caught between loyalty and survival. "Listen to me, all of you. The empire you've known is over. The system that required you to choose between service and humanity ends today. What comes next won't be easy. It won't be clean, but it will be honest. Some of you will leave, that's fine. Go with my blessing. But those who stay, you're not serving a king anymore. You're building something that doesn't have a name yet, something that treats you like people, not pieces." He looked at Thrace. "Assemble whoever's left. Palace guard, city watch, anyone still loyal. Bring them to the throne room." He looked at Reich. "Your forces too. Everyone. No sides. No factions. Just people choosing to be part of what happens next." The commanders exchanged glances. Old enemies. Old patterns. But both nodded. As the groups merged, as centuries of division started to crack, Valor felt it. The shift. The possibility. Also the terror. Because this was the moment you couldn't take back. The decision that locked every door behind you. Nira walked beside him as they entered the palace. "You know they'll never forgive you for this," she said quietly. "Who?" "The old guard. The nobles. Everyone who benefited from the fear. You're dismantling their power. Good. They'll kill you if they can. Then we die building something better than we were. She smiled. First real smile since he'd met her. There he is, the man under the crown. They reached the throne room, inside chaos, the council in full session. Serelith standing before them, not in chains, somehow free, guards surrounding her, nobles shouting, generals demanding order. Vaelor and Nyra entered together. The room fell silent. Every eye tracked them. The king who'd broken protocol, the woman who'd been sentenced to death, walking side by side like they hadn't just torn the empire in half. Serelith's face was ice. You've made your choice then. I have. She turned to the council. Then I invoke Article 7 of the Imperial Charter. When a king proves unfit to rule through action or inaction that threatens the stability of the realm, the council may call for immediate succession. Murmurs. Some supportive, some uncertain. Lord Varen stood. The queen makes a valid point. In one night, we've seen assault on the palace, arrest of the queen herself, collaboration with insurgent forces, and now this, bringing a condemned traitor into our council chambers. Lady Mareth rose. The merchants will not support a king who chooses personal desire over economic stability. Our trade partners are already questioning. Enough! Vaelor's voice cut through the noise like a blade. You want to talk about stability? Let's talk about truth. Serelith orchestrated the assassination attempt. She framed Nyra. She manipulated all of you into supporting an execution based on fabricated evidence. Lies, Serelith said calmly. Desperate lies from a man who's lost his way. I have proof, he gestured. Thrace brought forward a bound prisoner, one of the palace guard who'd been part of Serelith's inner circle. Tell them. The guard's face was pale, sweating. I can't. Tell them, or I hand you to Nyra's people, your choice. The man broke. The queen ordered us to plant the letters, to forge the seals. She said it was necessary to protect the empire from foreign influence. The room erupted. Serelith didn't flinch. A coerced confession from a frightened man proves nothing. There's more. Nyra stepped forward, produced a document from inside her coat. Financial records. Payments from the queen's personal accounts to known assassins. Dated weeks before the attempt. Signed by her steward. She handed it to Lord Varen. The nobleman read. His face changed. If this is authentic. It is, Thrace confirmed. We verified the seals, the accounts, the signatures. The queen has been planning this for months. Silence. The kind that comes before storms. Then Serelith laughed. Clear, cold, unrepentant. Of course I planned it. Did you think I'd leave something this important to chance? She stepped forward. No fear, no shame. I did what needed to be done. What none of you had the stomach for. That woman, she pointed at Nyra, was poison. Making him weak, making him question. A king who questions is a king who falls. General Korvac shifted. But treason was necessary. The empire is larger than any one person, larger than him, larger than me. It requires sacrifice. It requires people willing to do terrible things so others don't have to. She turned to Vaelor. You taught me that. In Krell, in the rebellion, every hard choice you made, you proved that power demands ruthlessness. And now you stand there pretending to be noble? Pretending that love and honesty matter more than survival? Maybe they do. Then you're a fool. And this empire will devour you. Let it try. The council watched. 40 people who'd spent their lives navigating power, reading currents, choosing sides based on who would win. And for the first time, they couldn't tell. Varen spoke carefully. What do you propose, Your Majesty? A trial, public, transparent. Let the people see what their queen did. Let them decide if that's the empire they want. And if they side with her, then I lose. But at least I lose honestly. Serlith's eyes narrowed. You'll fracture the empire. Every province will question your authority. Rebellions will spread. Everything we built will collapse. Then we'll build something better from the rubble. With what? Hope? Idealism? The world doesn't run on fairy tales, Vaelor. It runs on fear and force. It runs on what we choose to feed it. Choose? The word was poison on her tongue. You think people want choice? They want security. They want to know their children will be safe, their crops will grow, their borders will hold, and that requires strength, absolute, unquestionable, terrifying strength. Or maybe it requires trust. Nira's voice cut through the tension. Maybe people follow you not because they're afraid of what happens if they don't, but because they believe in what you're building. And what am I building? Sarilith challenged. What's your vision? Chaos? Democracy? Some fantasy where everyone has a voice and nothing gets done? Accountability? Evolution? A system that doesn't require you to kill parts of yourself to participate. Sarilith stepped closer to Nira. Two forces meeting, ice and fire. You're young, idealistic. You've never had to make the choices that keep millions alive. You've never had to execute children to prevent rebellion. Never had to starve a city to save a kingdom. I have. We have. And every one of those choices carved pieces out of our souls. I know, you know nothing. You're a girl playing at revolution while real leaders do the bloody work. Nira didn't back down. I'm a woman who watched your empire grind people into dust and call it progress. Who saw potential crushed under boots because it didn't fit the system. And I'm telling you, there's another way. Show me. Build it with us. The words hung in the air. Sarilith stared at Nira, then laughed again. Harsh. Final. You want me to help dismantle everything I built? Join your little experiment in idealism? I want you to admit that fear alone isn't enough. That the empire you built is eating itself from the inside. That something has to change, or there won't be an empire left to fight over. Silence. Then Sarilith turned to the council. Article 7 stands. I call for immediate vote. The king has proven unfit through collaboration with enemies of the state and abandonment of the principles that built this empire. All in favor of succession? Hands rose. Varen, Korvax, Marith. Others. But not all. Not even half. Those opposed? More hands. Thrace. Younger nobles. Merchants who'd been crushed by the old trade policies. The room split, almost exactly down the middle. Varen stood. We're deadlocked. Unprecedented. There's a tiebreaker, Sarilith said. Imperial law states that in deadlock, the decision falls to combat trial. Single combat. The Queen's champion versus the King's. Winner takes the throne. She's right, Varen confirmed. It's ancient law, rarely invoked, but valid. Valor looked at Thrace. The old general was already stepping forward. I'll stand for you. No. Sire, this is my fight. I'll face her champion myself. Sarilith smiled. Finally, some of the old fire. She turned. General Korvax, will you stand for me? The massive warrior stepped forward. The man who'd crushed the Southern Rebellion, who'd killed 100 men in single combat, who'd earned his reputation through blood and brutality. It would be my honor, Your Grace. Nira grabbed Valor's arm. You can't. He's too strong. He'll kill you. Maybe. Then why? Because if I'm asking people to believe in something better, I have to be willing to die for it. He walked to the center of the throne room. Korvax met him there. Up close, the general was even more imposing. Scars covering every visible inch of skin. Hands like hammers. Eyes dead to mercy. I respect you, Korvax said quietly, but I serve the Empire, not the man. I know, nothing personal, everything's personal. They drew blades, the council formed a circle, ancient ritual, older than the Empire, older than civilization, two people, two visions, steel deciding the future. Korvax struck first, fast for a big man. His blade whistled through air where Valor's head had been a second before. Valor rolled, came up striking. Korvax blocked. The impact rattled Valor's bones. This wasn't going to be skill versus skill. This was going to be survival versus destruction. They circled. Korvax patient. Valor calculating. The general had reach, strength, experience. Valor had speed and desperation. Sometimes desperation was enough. Korvax lunged. Valor sidestepped, dragged his blade across the general's arm. First blood. Shallow, but real. The general didn't even flinch. Good. This won't be boring. They clashed again, steel on steel. The sound echoed off marble walls that had heard it 1,000 times before. But this time felt different. This time, the future actually hung in the balance. Vialor could feel his age, 20 years of ruling, of soft living between campaigns. Korvax trained every day, lived for combat. This was going to hurt. The general's blade found his shoulder, shallow, meant to wear him down. Korvax was smart. Don't risk a killing blow early, bleed him, tire him, then finish it. Vaelor adapted, stopped trying to match strength, started targeting joints, tendons, the gaps in Korvax's defense that only appeared for fractions of seconds. His blade found the general's knee, deeper this time. Korvax's stance shifted. Slight limp now. The crowd murmured. Maybe this wasn't over yet. They broke apart, both breathing hard, blood on both blades. You're better than I expected, Korvax admitted. You're exactly what I expected. They circled again. Then Korvax changed tactics, stopped being patient, rushed forward with pure aggression, a flurry of strikes that forced Vaelor backward, defensive, desperate. The general's blade caught him across the ribs. Pain exploded. Vaelor stumbled. Korvax pressed. Another strike. Another. Vaelor blocked but barely. This was it. The moment where it ended. He could see it in Korvax's eyes. The calculation. One more strike, right through the heart. The general raised his blade. Vaelor didn't block. He dropped his sword. Confusion flashed across Korvax's face, just for a second, long enough. Vaelor stepped inside the general's reach, grabbed the man's sword arm with both hands, used Korvax's own momentum against him. The blade meant for Vaelor's heart went wide, and Vaelor's knee went up, hard, into Korvax's wounded leg. The general buckled. Vaelor grabbed Korvax's dropped sword mid-fall, spun, drove it through the gap in the general's armor. Korvax froze, looked down at the blade protruding from his chest, looked up at Vaelor. Well played. The general collapsed, dead before he hit the floor. Silence. Vaelor stood over the body, covered in blood, his and Korvax's, breathing like he'd run 1,000 miles, every muscle screaming, but alive. He turned to face the council. Is there anyone else who wants to challenge this? No one moved. Serlith's face was stone. Then it's decided. The king's rule stands. Serlith will face trial. This council will restructure to include voices beyond nobility and military. The empire will change. He walked to the throne. Sat. The weight of it felt different now, lighter somehow. Or maybe he was just finally strong enough to carry it honestly. Naira approached, stopped at the base of the steps. You did it! We did it! No, this was you. Choosing truth over fear, that's all you. He looked at her. This woman who'd crashed into his life and broken everything he thought he knew about power. What happens now? Now we figure out how to keep our promises. Together? She climbed the steps, stood beside him. Not on the throne, she'd never want that. But beside it. Partner, equal, force of nature in her own right. Together. The council began to disperse. Some bitter, some relieved, all of them uncertain. Uncertainty was good. It meant the old certainties were finally dying. Thrace approached the throne. What are your orders? Vaelor looked around the room. At the blood, the bodies, the broken traditions. Secure the palace. Tend the wounded. Prepare for Serlith's trial, and send word to every province. The old empire is dead. What comes next? We build together. And if they refuse? Then they refuse. But we're done forcing compliance. Thrace nodded. Started to leave. Stopped. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. The man you became today. That's the king I always hoped you'd be. The words hit harder than Korvax's blade had. Thrace left. Vaelor sat on his throne with Naira beside him and felt the full weight of what he'd just done. He'd dismantled the empire's foundation, challenged every principle it was built on, made enemies of half the council and uncertain allies of the rest. He'd risked everything, and won. Except winning meant the real work started now. Winning meant proving this wasn't just chaos. Winning meant building something that had never existed. An empire based on trust instead of terror. Nira's hand found his. You're thinking too loud. I'm thinking we might have just made the biggest mistake in history. Or the best decision. Won't know until we try. And if we fail, then at least we failed trying to be better. Outside, the sun broke through clouds, first light in hours. It illuminated the throne room, turned the blood on the floor to copper, made the marble glow. New day, new empire, new everything. Valor squeezed Naira's hand. Then let's get to work. They rose from the throne together. And in that moment, King Valor Draven understood the truth that would define the rest of his reign. Power isn't about control, it's about choice. Fear isn't strength, courage is. And the hardest thing a king ever does isn't conquering enemies, it's conquering himself. The door to the throne room opened. A messenger entered, young, terrified, covered in road dust. Your Majesty, urgent news from the eastern provinces. Speak. Lord Davin's army. It's not marching on the capital. Where then? North, toward the borderlands. They've allied with 3 other provinces. They're declaring independence, forming their own kingdom. The words landed like stones in still water. How many men? 30,000, maybe more. They're gathering support from nobles who oppose the Queen's arrest and your new policies. Nira's grip on his hand tightened. So it begins. Valor looked at her, at the council members still in the room, at Thrace. Send word to Davin. Offer negotiation. Terms. Whatever he wants short of my throne. And if he refuses, then we have civil war. The messenger fled. The room fell silent again. This was the cost. The price of change. The empire fracturing because half of it couldn't accept evolution. Exactly what Seralith had predicted. Naira turned to him. We can still stop this. Go to them. Explain. Find common ground. And if there is no common ground, then we fight for what we believe. Same as we've been doing. Except now it's not just us risking everything. It's everyone. The whole empire. The empire was already dying, Valor. Slowly, quietly, rotting from the inside. At least this way we're choosing how it transforms instead of watching it collapse. Thrace approached. The men are asking for orders. Do we mobilize? Prepare for siege? Valor stood, walked to the window. Outside, the capital sprawled. Thousands of buildings. Hundreds of thousands of lives. All of them about to be caught in the storm he'd created. Power without meaning is a hollow throne, he'd thought on that balcony 3 days ago. Now he'd discover if meaning was enough when thrones turned to battlefields. No mobilization yet. Send diplomats first. Try every peaceful option. And when those fail, then we fight. But we fight for something worth dying for. He turned back to face the room. The old empire demanded submission. The new one offers choice. Even if that choice is to walk away. Even if that choice splits us apart. Because freedom without the option to refuse isn't freedom. It's just a prettier cage. Nira smiled, sad but proud. There he is, the king who learned to let go. I haven't let go. I've just stopped holding so tight I crush what I'm trying to protect. The sun climbed higher, the blood dried on marble floors. And somewhere in the eastern provinces, armies gathered for a war nobody wanted but everyone saw coming. Because that's what happens when you dismantle fear. The people who benefited from it fight back. And the only question that matters is whether you're willing to pay the price for better. Valor Draven looked at Naira, at Thrace, at the empire he'd broken and was trying to remake, and knew the answer. Yes, whatever it costs, however long it takes. The king who'd built an empire on fear would tear it down with hope, or die trying. The throne room doors burst open again. This time, Seralith, surrounded by guards, chains on her wrists but fire in her eyes. You think you've won, she said. You think killing Korvax and making speeches changes anything? It changes everything. No. It just delays the inevitable. This empire runs on fear because fear works. Hope is beautiful until the first harvest fails, the first enemy attacks, the first hard choice needs to be made. Then people will remember why they needed a king who could do what you never will. What's that? Make the choice that saves millions, even if it damns you. I've made plenty of those choices. No. You've made the choices that let you sleep at night. Real leadership means embracing the nightmares. Then maybe real leadership is the problem. She laughed. Last time. Bitter and knowing. Enjoy your experiment, Valor. Enjoy your ideals and your new empire built on trust. I'll be watching from whatever cell you throw me in, watching it collapse, Watching you realize I was right all along, or watching you realize you were wrong. We'll see." The guards led her away, and Valor stood in his throne room covered in blood, surrounded by the wreckage of certainty, staring into a future that promised nothing but struggle. But for the first time in 20 years, that future was his to shape. Not fears, not the Empire's, not destinies. His. And that terrified him more than any battle ever had. Because now there was no one else to blame if it all fell apart. Just him. Just his choices. Just the man he'd finally decided to become. Nira stepped beside him. "Ready?" "No." "Good. That means you're paying attention." They walked out of the throne room together. Behind them, the sun climbed higher. Ahead, war gathered on the horizon. And between those two certainties, in the space where kings became human and humans became legends, Valor Draven took the first step into the unknown, knowing he could never go back, knowing the Empire would never be the same, knowing that sometimes the bravest thing a man can do isn't fight, it's change. The betrayal came on the third day of peace. 3 days. That's how long the fragile new order held before it shattered like glass under a hammer. Valor stood in the war room with maps spread across the table, marking supply routes to the northern provinces. Diplomatic efforts with Davin were progressing slowly, but progressing. No blood yet. No open warfare. Just tense negotiations and careful words. Hope, fragile and dangerous, had started to take root. Then Thrace walked in with a face carved from stone. "We need to talk. Alone." Valor looked up, something in the general's voice, a flatness that came before delivering news that couldn't be softened. Nira was reviewing grain reports near the window. She glanced between them. "I'll step out." "No." Valor's instinct flared. "Whatever this is, she hears it too." Thrace hesitated, then nodded. He placed a letter on the table, sealed with red wax. The seal of House Voss. Nira's house. Her face went pale. "Where did you get that?" "Intercepted this morning. Rider heading north, to Davin's camp." Silence filled the room like poison gas. Valor picked up the letter, broke the seal, read. The words were precise, clinical, a detailed plan outlining troop movements, weak points in the capital's defenses, the schedule for Sarilith's trial. Information only someone inside the palace would know, information being sold to the rebellion, signed with Nira's mark. His hands didn't shake. That's what 20 years of kingship taught you, how to keep your body still while your world collapsed. He looked at her. "Explain this." Nira's face had gone from pale to gray. She stared at the letter like it was a serpent. "That's not my handwriting. But it's your seal. I didn't write this." "Then who did?" "I don't know." The words came out desperate, raw, nothing like the fierce confidence he'd come to expect from her. Thrace cleared his throat. "There's more. We found evidence of regular correspondence between Lady Nira's people and the Northern Lords, dating back months, before she even arrived at the capital." Valor's mind raced, processing, analyzing, looking for the angle, the explanation that made this make sense, because it had to make sense. 3 days ago, she'd stood beside him. 3 days ago, she'd helped him tear down an empire built on fear. 3 days ago, she'd been, what, real? Or the most perfect trap ever set? Show me the evidence. Thrace produced a leather case. Inside, a dozen letters. Different hands, different seals, but all containing the same thread. A coordinated effort to destabilize the empire from within. And at the center of it all, references to the Northern Wolf, Nira's title among her people. Valor read them one by one, each word a blade, each sentence a wound. "This can't be real," Nira said. Her voice shook now. "Someone is framing me. Again. Just like Sarilith did." "Sarilith is in a cell," Thrace said quietly, "under constant guard. She couldn't have orchestrated this. Then someone else. Someone who wants to destroy what we're building. Or someone who is building their own empire all along." The accusation hung between them. Nira's eyes flashed, anger replacing shock. "You believe this? After everything? After I stayed when I could have run? After I stood beside you against the entire council? I believe evidence." "Evidence can be manufactured. You know that. You've done it yourself." The truth of that landed hard. He had manufactured evidence, planted letters, forged seals. It was how empires worked, how power operated. But that knowledge didn't make this easier. It made it worse, because now he couldn't trust his own judgment, couldn't tell the difference between real betrayal and perfect deception. The door opened. One of Naira's people, Reich, the massive commander who'd led the rescue 3 days ago. He saw the letters, saw their faces. What's happening? Velor met his eyes. Did you know about communications with the Northern Rebellion? Reich's face closed down. Combat ready, dangerous. What communications? These. Velor gestured to the evidence. Reich moved to the table. Read. His jaw worked. Where did these come from? Does it matter? Yeah, it matters. Because Naira didn't write them. How do you know? Because I did. The room froze. Naira spun toward him. What? Reich didn't look at her, kept his eyes on Velor. Everything in those letters, the intelligence, the coordination with Davin, all of it. Me and 3 others from our original group. We've been feeding information north since the day you arrested her. Velor's hand went to his sword. Instinct. Why? Reich's voice stayed flat, factual. Because we don't trust you. We saw what you did. How fast you turned on her, how easily you chose the Empire over truth. We figured if we're going to be part of this new order, we need insurance. Insurance. Leverage. A way out if you betray her again. Davin's forces were our backup plan. Nira looked like she'd been struck. You went behind my back. To the enemy. Reich finally met her gaze. To protect you. From him. She crossed the distance between them in 3 steps. Hit him. Hard. Open palm across his face. I don't need protection. I need loyalty. We're loyal. That's why we did it. No. Loyalty is trust. This is betrayal. The word echoed. Betrayal. The thing that broke empires, ended reigns, destroyed whatever fragile thing was trying to grow between Velor and Naira. Thrace moved. Guards appeared at the door, weapons drawn. Reich didn't reach for his sword, just stood there, accepting. What happens now? Velor looked at the evidence. At Reich. At Naira standing between them, torn between her past and her present. This was the moment. The choice that defined everything. He could arrest Reich, execute him as a traitor, send a message that betrayal had consequences, prove to the council that he was still strong, still ruthless, still the king who did what needed to be done. Or he could try something else. Your people, Velor said, the ones working with you. Names. Commander Sit. Names. Now. Reich rattled off 3 names, all from Naira's original group, all people who'd fought beside her in the north. Thrace, bring them here. Quietly. No arrests. Tell them their commander requests their presence. Thrace hesitated. Sire, do it. The general left. Velor turned to Naira. Did you know? No. The word was immediate, certain. But you understand why they did it. Silence. Then, yes. Because I gave them reason not to trust me. You sentenced me to death based on fabricated evidence. You chose fear over truth. Why wouldn't they plan for you to do it again? The accusation landed clean. No deflection, no softening. He'd earned this, every bit of it. Reich spoke. For what it's worth, she fought us on it, said you'd changed, that this was different. We didn't believe her. Why not? Because men like you don't change. You just adapt, find new ways to hold power. And we've seen too many leaders who talked about transformation right up until the moment it cost them something real. The words stung because they were fair. How many times had Velor watched rulers promise change, only to revert to old patterns the second they faced real opposition? How was he different? The door opened. Thrace returned with 3 people. 2 men, 1 woman. All warriors. All carrying the same wariness Reich had. They saw the letters on the table, saw their commander's face, understood immediately. The woman, Kira, a scout who'd tracked prey through frozen wastelands, spoke first. We did what we thought was right. By betraying your leader? By protecting her from someone who already betrayed her once. Velor walked around the table, faced all 4 of them. You don't trust me? Fine. I've given you reasons not to, but you're part of this now, part of what we're trying to build. And if every person who doubts my commitment starts their own insurance policy, we don't have a new empire. We have chaos. The oldest of the group, a grizzled fighter named Tormund, stepped forward. So what do you want? Our heads? Public execution to prove you're still the ruthless king? No, I want honesty. Tormund laughed. Harsh. Honesty. From a king who built his throne on lies. Fair. But I'm trying to build something different now. And that starts with being honest about what I am, what I've done, and what it costs. He gestured to Naira. She believed I could change, could be better. You didn't. Both positions make sense given what I've shown you. But here's the thing about trust. Someone has to go first. Someone has to take the risk. And you want that to be us? I want it to be all of us. Me included. Kira's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? It means I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone. Not Seralith, not Thrace, not even myself until recently. He paused. The room waited. I'm terrified. Every day. Every decision. Because the way I learned to lead, through fear and force and absolute control, it worked. It kept the Empire stable for 20 years. And now I'm dismantling the only thing I know how to do. The admission cost something. He could feel it. The exposure. The vulnerability, everything a king was never supposed to show. I don't know if this new way works, don't know if trust and honesty can replace fear and force, but I'm willing to find out, willing to risk everything I built to discover if there's something better. He looked at each of them. You set up a backup plan because you thought I'd revert. That's smart, probably necessary, but it also guarantees failure. Because if everyone keeps one foot out the door, we never actually commit to building something new. So here's my offer. You tell Davin the truth, that you were feeding him intelligence but you're done, that Naira stays here by choice, not coercion, and you commit, really commit, to making this work. Reich's voice was cautious. And if we refuse, then you're free to go. No arrests, no executions. Take your backup plan and walk away. I won't stop you. The four exchanged glances. You're serious, Tormund said. You just let us leave. I'm done forcing people to stay in cages, even if letting them go weakens me. Why? Because Naira was right. Power built on forcing compliance isn't power. It's just slow-motion collapse. Silence, the kind that comes before irreversible decisions. Kira spoke first. I'll stay. Cut contact with Davin. Commit to this. One by one, the others nodded, even Reich. But the big commander added, one condition. You fail her again, you choose empire over truth even once, we're gone. And we take her with us whether she wants to go or not. Deal. They clasped forearms. The old way. The warrior way. A bond that meant something. Thrace cleared his throat. That still leaves the problem of Davin. He has intelligence about our defenses, knows our weak points. Then we change our weak points, Naira said. Rotate guard schedules, relocate supply caches, make the intelligence obsolete. She looked at Valor. Unless you want to use this as justification for a preemptive strike. Do I? She stepped closer. Close enough that only he could hear. The old you would see the opening and take it. Destroy Davin before he destroys you. And the new me? Finds another way. He turned to Thrace. Send emissaries. Tell Davin we know about the intelligence leak. Offer him full transparency in exchange for continued negotiations. Show him we're serious about changing how power works. And if he attacks anyway, then we defend. But we don't strike first. Thrace nodded. Left to carry out orders he clearly thought were insane. The room emptied. Guards, Reich's people, until only Valor and Naira remained. She stood by the window, looking out at the capital. Dawn breaking over rooftops that had seen 1,000 betrayals, but maybe never one handled like this. You took a risk, she said. I'm taking a lot of risk these days. What if they betray you again? Then I'll deal with it, but at least I'll know I tried something different. She turned, looked at him with eyes that had seen too much, but still somehow carried hope. You're changing, actually changing. I'm trying. It's terrifying, isn't it? Not knowing if you're building something better or just destroying what worked. Every day. She crossed to him, put her hand on his chest, over the scar tissue and old wounds. I'm sorry for what my people did, for making you doubt me. You didn't make me doubt. I did that myself. Because doubt is what I learned. Suspicion. Assuming everyone has an angle. Do they? Probably. But maybe the angle can be aligned. Maybe we can build a system where people's self-interest and the common good point the same direction. That's ambitious. Or insane. Hard to tell the difference. She smiled. First real smile in 3 days. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Ask me again in a year, when we're either building something revolutionary or watching it burn. She kissed him, brief, real. Either way, we burn together. The moment broke when bells rang, loud, urgent tower bells, the warning system for incoming threats. They ran to the balcony. Below, the city gates were opening, a force approaching under white flags. Diplomatic party. But the banners they carried made Valor's blood freeze, black and gold, Davin's colors. Beside them, red and silver, the eastern provinces. And at the front, a banner Valor hadn't seen in 15 years. One he'd thought destroyed during the purges. The silver wolf on crimson. House Mordrin, his father's house. The family he'd killed to take the throne. Thrace appeared beside them. Sire, they're requesting immediate audience, all the rebel lords together. They say they have a proposal or a trap, possibly both. Nira's hand found his. You don't have to see them. Yes, I do. Because this is what the new way means. Facing enemies without knowing if they're coming in good faith. They assembled in the throne room, every available guard. The council hastily summoned, Nira beside the throne, Reich and his people positioned at strategic points. Valor sat. Tried to look like a king instead of a man bracing for impact. The doors opened. Lord Davin entered first. Tall, scarred, old enough to remember when kings were made through blood, not diplomacy. Behind him, 6 other lords from provinces that had declared independence. And at the back, a woman. Young. Maybe 25. Hair like midnight. Eyes like frozen lakes. She wore the silver wolf. Valor's composure cracked. Just for a second. Because he knew that face. Had seen it in nightmares for 15 years. His sister's face. Alara. The one he'd thought died with the rest of his family when he'd ordered the purge to prevent civil war. The one he'd mourned in the few moments he allowed himself to feel anything. Alive. The throne room fell silent. Davin spoke. Your Majesty, we come under flag of truce, with a proposal that serves all parties. Valor couldn't look away from Alara. She stared back. No warmth, no recognition, just cold assessment. Speak. Davin gestured to the woman. Lady Alara Mordrin, rightful heir to House Mordrin, sole survivor of the purge you ordered 15 years ago. Raised in secret in the eastern provinces, trained, educated, prepared to take back what was stolen from her family. The words landed like hammer blows. Valor had killed his own family. That was known. Accepted. The price of preventing civil war when his father died and 7 different houses claimed the throne. He'd chosen to be the monster so the empire could survive. But Alara had survived. And now she was here. She stepped forward. Her voice was clear, strong. I could claim the throne through blood right, challenge you to combat, rally the provinces that never accepted your rule, start a war that would consume the empire. Pause. Or we could end this differently. How? Marry me. The room erupted, nobles shouting, generals reaching for weapons. Nira's hand tightening on the throne's armrest. Valor raised his hand. Silence returned. Slowly. Explain. Alara's eyes never left his. You killed my family, my parents, my brothers, everyone I loved. You took everything from me. But you also stabilized the empire, ended the succession crisis, created 20 years of relative peace. And I've had 15 years to decide if I want revenge or results. Revenge is satisfying, but results change the world. You want to unite our claims, legitimize both our rules. Exactly. You marry me. We combine Mordrin blood right with Draven's strength. The provinces that follow me and the provinces that follow you become one empire. No civil war, no bloodshed. And Nira? Alara glanced at Nira, something unreadable in her expression. She can remain. As mistress. Advisor. Whatever arrangement you prefer, I'm not asking for love. I'm proposing a political alliance. Naira stood. Absolutely not. Lady Voss, don't Lady Voss me. He's not a breeding stallion to be traded for political stability. Isn't he? Davin's voice cut through. That's what kings are. Tools of state. Personal desires are irrelevant. Valor watched it all. The maneuvering, the calculations, the old way reasserting itself. And he understood. This was the test, the real one. Ilara's offer was perfect. United the empire, prevented war, gave him everything he claimed to want. Peace, stability, a path forward. All it cost was the one thing he'd just discovered mattered. His humanity, his choice, his right to love who he chose instead of who served the empire best. The old Valor would have taken the deal. Married Ilara, kept Naira as a mistress, preserved power at the cost of everything that made it worth having. The question was, who was he now? He stood. Lady Ilara, I won't pretend your claim isn't legitimate. You are the last of House Mordrin. You have every right to seek justice for what I did. She waited. But I won't marry you. Won't trade myself like a piece on a game board. Won't go back to the system where kings are symbols instead of humans. Then you choose war, Davin said. Maybe. Or maybe I choose to face consequences, to accept that some things can't be fixed with political arrangements. He looked at Ilara. I killed your family. That's true. I can't undo it, can't make it right, but I can give you a choice. What choice? Take the throne. Right now. I'll step down. Hand you the crown. Let you rule. The provinces will accept you. The council will adapt. And the empire stays intact. Valor, Nira's voice. Shocked. He raised his hand, kept his eyes on Ilara. Or you can join me. Help build something that doesn't require us to sacrifice our humanity for stability. A system where your claim and my strength work together without marriage, without forcing either of us into roles we don't want. Ilara's face showed nothing. Why would I choose the second option? Because the first option makes you what I was, a ruler trapped in a cage of duty. And I think you're better than that. How would you know? You don't know me. I know you survived 15 years planning revenge but came here with a proposal instead of an army. That takes vision, restraint, the ability to see past what you want to what might be necessary. He stepped down from the throne, walked toward her, stopped 3 feet away. I'm sorry for what I did, for what it cost you. Sorry doesn't fix it, but it's all I have. Ilara's composure cracked, just slightly, moisture in her eyes. You killed them in front of me. Made me watch. I was 10 years old. I know. You said it was necessary, that the empire required it. I believed that then. And now? Now I think necessity is just a word we use to justify becoming monsters. The room held its breath. Ilara looked at Davin, at the other lords, at the throne, then back at Valor. I spent 15 years hating you, planning how I'd make you suffer, imagining your face when I took everything from you. And standing here I realized something. Taking the throne doesn't give me back my family. Starting a war doesn't heal the wound. Revenge is just another cage. So what do you choose? She was quiet for a long time. Then, I'll join you. Not as your wife, as your partner in rebuilding. With one condition. Name it. Every year, on the anniversary of their deaths, you remember. Publicly. You tell the empire what you did and why it was wrong. You carry that weight forever. Agreed. Just like that? Just like that. Because you're right. I should carry it, should never forget what the old way cost. Ilara extended her hand. Then let's build something better. He took it. Behind them, the council erupted in arguments, some supporting the alliance, some demanding marriage, some calling it all madness. Davin stepped forward. This doesn't solve everything. The provinces still have grievances, demands for representation, changes to trade laws. Then we negotiate. All of it, openly. With you at the table as equals instead of subjects. You're serious. I'm serious. The old lord studied him, then nodded slowly. We'll try your way. But understand, this is a test. You fail, we revert to the old methods, and those methods don't include mercy. Fair. The delegation left, promises made, frameworks established, the beginning of something that had no name yet. When they were gone, Naira approached. You almost gave it up. The throne. Actually offered to walk away. I did. Why? Because I finally understand what Sarilith never did. Power you can't walk away from isn't power. It's captivity. She kissed him, long, real. When they broke apart, she whispered, You're going to make a terrible traditional king. Good. I'm done being traditional. They turned to find Thrace waiting. The general's face was grim. We have a problem, a big one. What now? Sarilith. She's escaped. Impossible. She's under guard in the deepest cell. Was under guard. 3 guards are dead. Cell is empty. She's gone. How long? At least 4 hours, maybe more. Valor's mind raced. 4 hours. Sarilith could be anywhere, could have reached any number of safe houses, allies, resources. She knows everything, our defenses, our plans, our weaknesses. Thrace nodded. And she has nothing left to lose. No throne, no empire. Just rage and intelligence and 20 years of knowing how to destroy threats. Have you issued alerts? Locked down the city? Yes. But sire, there's something else. What? Before she escaped, she left a message, carved into the cell wall. Show me. They went down, into the dungeons, into the cell that had held the woman who'd been queen, partner, architect of empire. On the wall, scratched into stone with something sharp. You chose sentiment over survival. Now you'll learn why that's fatal. The empire eats the weak, always. Below it, a symbol. The old mark of the Assassin's Guild. The group that had supposedly been disbanded years ago. The group Sarilith had once controlled. Nira read the message. Her face went pale. She's going to come at us with everything she has. Valor stared at the words, at the promise carved in stone. This was it. The consequence of change. The price of choosing humanity over fear. Sarilith would use every tool of the old empire. Every ruthless tactic. Every lesson they'd learned together about how to destroy enemies. And she'd do it with the precision of someone who knew him better than anyone, who'd built the system he was trying to dismantle, who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The real war was just beginning, not against external enemies, against the ghost of what he'd been, the monster he'd created, the empire he'd built now, turning all its terrible machinery against him. He looked at Naira. Can we survive this? I don't know, but we're going to find out. Thrace cleared his throat. What are your orders? Valor thought about everything that had led to this moment, every choice, every compromise, every time he'd chosen fear over faith. And then he did the one thing the old Valor never would have. He told the truth. I don't know. I don't know if we can beat Sarilith. Don't know if this new way works when the old way comes at you with knives. Don't know if choosing humanity over empire was brave or just suicide in slow motion. Silence. Then, but I know I'm done pretending I have all the answers. Done acting like certainty is the same as strength. So here's what we do. We gather everyone, council, guards, Naira's people, Alara's faction, everyone, and we figure it out together. Because if this new empire is going to work, it can't just be me making choices everyone else has to live with. Thrace looked at him like he'd grown a second head. Sire, in times of crisis, people need a strong leader. Someone certain. Someone who acts without hesitation. Maybe. Or maybe they need someone honest enough to admit uncertainty and brave enough to ask for help. He walked past them, up the stairs, out of the dungeons. Behind him, Naira called, Where are you going? To call the council, to tell them the truth, that we're facing the most dangerous enemy we've ever fought, and I don't have a perfect plan. And you think they'll follow you? I think it's time to find out if this new way actually works, or if Sarilith was right all along. He reached the throne room, gathered the heralds, sent the summons. Within an hour, they assembled. Nobles, generals, merchants, Naira's people, Alara's delegation, everyone with a stake in what happened next. Valor stood before them, not on the throne, on the floor, at their level, and he told them everything. About Sarilith's escape, about the threat she represented, about his own doubts and fears and uncertainty. He expected outrage, demands for strength, calls for his removal. Instead, something else happened. Lord Varen stood. I've served under 5 kings. Every one of them pretended they had all the answers. Every one of them led us into disasters because they were too proud to admit uncertainty. You're the first one brave enough to ask for help. Lady Marith rose. The merchants will contribute resources, intelligence networks, whatever you need to counter Seralith's advantage. General after general stood, pledging forces, support. Loyalty not based on fear, but on the radical idea that honesty might actually work. And Valor understood something fundamental. The old empire ran on fear because fear is simple, predictable, easy to maintain. But the new empire, if it could exist, would run on trust, which was harder, messier, required constant work. But maybe, just maybe, strong enough to survive what fear could not. An empire that could bend instead of breaking, that could evolve instead of fragmenting, that could choose transformation over preservation. He looked at Naira, at Alara, at Thrace, at all of them. Then let's get to work. Because Seralith is coming, and when she does, we're going to show her something she never learned. What's that? That the strongest chains aren't made of fear and force. They're made of people choosing to stand together even when it's terrifying, even when it might fail, even when the old way would have been safer. Because some things are worth dying for, and building something better than what came before is one of them. The council dispersed, plans forming, alliances solidifying, the machinery of the new empire grinding into motion. And Valor stood in the center of it all, knowing he'd just committed to a path with no going back. Seralith would come with everything the old empire had taught them. All he had was the fragile hope that something new could survive against something proven. It should have terrified him. Instead, for the first time in his life, it felt like freedom. The choice was made. Now they'd discover if change was possible, or if the empire would consume them all. The attack came at midnight on the 7th day. 7 days of preparation, 7 days of building alliances, fortifying defenses, trying to anticipate every move Seralith might make. 7 days of the fragile new empire holding its breath. Not long enough. The explosion tore through the eastern watchtower like the hand of an angry god. Stone and fire erupted into the night sky. The shockwave rattled windows across the capital. Screams followed. Then the bells. Those damned warning bells that had rung too many times in the past month. Valor was already moving before the sound faded. Out of bed, armor half-fastened, sword in hand. Muscle memory from 1,000 emergencies, the body remembering what the mind was still processing. Naira appeared beside him, pulling on her coat, face grim. East Tower. That's the weak point we rotated yesterday. Someone told her, we have a leak, or she's just that good. Both of them knew the answer. Seralith was that good. 20 years building an intelligence network, cultivating assets, learning every crack in the Empire's foundation. She didn't need a leak. She'd built the entire system. She knew where it broke before it broke. That's what made her so dangerous. She wasn't just an enemy. She was the Empire's memory, its dark mirror, the ruthless architect who'd designed every defense now being turned against them. They ran through corridors filling with smoke, guards scrambling, nobles fleeing, the palace transforming from seat of power to war zone in seconds. Thrace met them at the war room. 3 more explosions. North Gate, armory, water supply. Coordinated, surgical. Casualties? Counting now. But it's bad. The war room filled rapidly. Generals, council members, Alara and her delegation, Reich and the northern fighters, everyone who'd committed to this fragile alliance now facing its first real test. Valor spread his hands on the war table, looked at the map marked with burning red points where Seralith's strikes had landed. She's cutting our resources. Water, weapons, defensive positions, classic siege preparation. We're not under siege, Lord Varen said. We're inside our own capital. We are now. Lady Marith's voice shook. How many operatives does she have inside the city? Enough. She's had years to place them. Sleeper agents in guard units, merchant houses, noble families, people who've been waiting for activation. Can we root them out? Valor met her eyes. Not fast enough. She knows our protocols, knows how we identify threats. Every move we make, she's already planned for, so we're fighting blind against someone who sees everything. Yes. The word landed heavy. Then we've already lost General Korvax's replacement, A younger officer named Tavin spoke. If she has that much advantage, we haven't lost until we quit. Naira's voice cut through the despair. She moved to the map, pointed to the strike locations. Look at the pattern. She's not hitting randomly. She's forcing us to respond, spread our forces thin. Then she'll strike the real target. What real target? Nira's finger landed on the throne room. She wants him. Everything else is distraction. The room fell silent. Thrace spoke carefully. If she wants you dead, sire, she'll come heavy. Every asset, every favor, everything she's been holding in reserve. Good. Let her come to me. You can't be serious. I'm absolutely serious. We fortify the throne room, turn it into a killing ground. Let her spend her resources getting to me. Meanwhile, the rest of you focus on damage control. Evacuate civilians, secure the water supply, put out fires, save the city. You're using yourself as bait. I'm using myself as the prize. There's a difference. Alara stepped forward. In the chaos of the past week, she'd proven herself sharp, decisive, everything her bloodline promised. If you die, this alliance collapses. The provinces revert. Civil war becomes inevitable. Then don't let me die. How? By trusting that I learned something in 20 years of surviving assassination attempts. He looked around the room, at faces marked by smoke and fear, and the realization that idealism was about to meet brutal reality. This is what change costs. Sarilith represents everything we're trying to move past. Fear, manipulation, power through ruthlessness. If we can't survive her, we don't deserve to build what comes next. And if you're wrong, if she kills you and proves that the old way is the only way that works, then you were right to doubt me. But at least we'll know. Nira grabbed his arm. Don't do this. Don't throw yourself at her like some sacrificial gesture. I'm not. I'm ending it. The only way it can end, her or me, old empire or new. There's no middle ground anymore. There has to be. There isn't. And you know it. He touched her face, rough hands, calloused from swords and choices. I need you out there, leading the evacuation, keeping people safe. That's where you're strongest. I'm strongest with you. No. You're strongest when you're protecting people who can't protect themselves. That's always been who you are. She wanted to argue. He could see it. But she also knew he was right. Fine. But you better survive this, because if you die heroically, I'm going to be furious. Noted. She kissed him. Hard. Final. Then left with Reich and half the fighters. The others dispersed. Orders given. Plan set. The machinery of crisis management grinding into action. Only Thrace remained. The old general looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. You know this is a trap within a trap. She wants you isolated. Wants to take you in single combat, where her skill matters more than your numbers. I know, and you're walking into it anyway. What choice do I have? Run? Hide? Let her burn the city trying to draw me out? At least this way the damage is contained. Or at least this way, you finally get to face what you made. The words hit like a blade. Valor looked at his oldest friend. Is that what you think? That I want this? I think you've been running from Sarilith since the day you arrested her. Running from what she represents, what you were together, and now you're out of road. Maybe. Thrace gripped his shoulder. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you, the man you've become, the choices you're making, even if they get you killed. Thanks, I think. The general left, and Valor stood alone in the war room, surrounded by maps of an empire he was trying to save by destroying everything it had been. There's a point in every transformation where you can't go back, where the old self is dead but the new self isn't fully born. You exist in between, vulnerable, exposed, neither one thing nor the other. Kings aren't supposed to exist in that space. Kings are supposed to be certain, absolute, unshakable. But maybe that's the lie that keeps empires from evolving. The demand for certainty in a world that's fundamentally uncertain. The insistence on strength that looks like rigidity instead of flexibility. He picked up his sword, tested its weight. How many men had died on this blade? How many choices had it made for him? Time to find out if he could be something other than what it demanded. The throne room had been transformed. Barriers at every entrance, archers positioned in the upper galleries, guards in formation. Every defensive advantage they could manufacture in 6 hours. It looked impressive, professional. Exactly what you'd expect from an empire that had spent 20 years preparing for threats. Sarilith would see through it in seconds. Vaelor took his position on the throne, not sitting, standing beside it, sword drawn, waiting. The attack came from everywhere at once. Explosions blew the north doors inward. Smoke filled the chamber, shapes moving through it, armed, fast, professional. The guards engaged, steel on steel. Screams, blood spraying on marble that had been cleaned 1,000 times and would be cleaned 1,000 more. Vaelor fought. Met the first attacker with a strike that opened the man's throat. Pivoted, blocked, killed the second, the third. His body moving on instinct, 20 years of combat experience compressed into muscle memory. But these weren't ordinary attackers. These were Sarilith's elite, the ones she'd trained personally, the ones who knew every technique he did because she'd learned them beside him. They adapted, countered, pressed. He took a cut across his arm, shallow but bleeding. Another across his thigh, deeper. His leg buckled. The guards were falling, one by one, overwhelmed by attackers who fought without hesitation, without mercy, without the slightest doubt about their purpose. That's what the old empire created. Perfect weapons. Human in shape, but weapon in function. He'd been one once. Maybe still was. The smoke cleared. Bodies everywhere. His guards. Her assassins. The throne room transformed into an abattoir. And walking through the carnage, untouched, Sarilith. She wore black, simple, functional. Her hair pulled back, face calm. She looked exactly as she had 20 years ago when they'd first met on that battlefield. Beautiful, dangerous, absolutely certain. She stopped 10 feet away. "Hello, Vaelor." Her voice carried no emotion, just fact, like she was commenting on weather. "Sarilith, you've made quite a mess of my empire. Our empire. No, mine. I built it. You were just the face, the symbol. I was the architect. And you're tearing down my life's work for what? A woman you've known less than a year? Some fantasy about power without fear? It's not a fantasy, isn't it? Look around. I've been free 7 days. In that time, I've crippled your defenses, turned your allies against you, and brought you here. Alone. Bleeding. Exactly where I want you. That's what real power looks like. No, that's what desperation looks like." Her composure cracked. Just slightly. Desperation? I'm not the one who threw away a stable empire for idealism. You're the one who couldn't adapt. Couldn't accept that maybe fear isn't the only tool. Fear is the only tool that works. Everything else is noise. She drew her blade. Elegant. Perfectly balanced. He'd given it to her 10 years ago. Anniversary gift. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. "I'm going to kill you," she said. "Not because I hate you, not because I'm angry, but because you've proven you're no longer fit to lead, and someone has to save the empire from your weakness. By burning it down, by cutting out the infection before it spreads." They circled. Predators, partners, everything they'd been twisted into opposition. "You could walk away," Vaelor said. "Leave. Start over somewhere else. I won't pursue you. And let you remake the empire into some democratic fantasy? Let everything I built crumble? It's not yours anymore. It never was. Empires don't belong to people. They evolve or they die. Then this one dies with you." She struck, fast, precise, the blade whistling toward his heart. He blocked. Barely. The impact rattled his injured arm. She pressed. A flurry of strikes that forced him backward. Each one calculated. No wasted movement, pure efficiency. This was Sarilith at her most dangerous. Not angry, not emotional, just committed to a goal and willing to do whatever it took to achieve it. He'd taught her that. Or maybe she'd taught him. Hard to remember after 20 years of shaping each other. Their blades met, locked, faces inches apart. "You're slower," she said. "Softer. Letting that woman make you weak. Or maybe I'm finally fighting for something that matters. Survival matters. Everything else is luxury." She broke the lock, spun, her blade opening a line across his back. Pain exploded. He stumbled, caught himself on the throne's armrest. Blood ran down his spine. The cut was deep, not fatal yet, but enough to slow him, weaken him. She knew it. smiled. This is how it ends. The king who chose sentiment over strength, bleeding out on the throne he wasn't strong enough to keep. You're wrong. About what? About everything. He pushed off the throne, attacked, not with technique, not with precision, just raw aggression, the kind of fighting you do when you've stopped caring about survival and started caring about message. She blocked, countered. But he didn't stop. Didn't give her space to think, to calculate, to use her superior skill. Just pressure. Constant. Overwhelming. Because that was the thing about desperation. It made you unpredictable, made you dangerous in ways that skill couldn't account for. His blade found her shoulder. First blood. She hissed. Stepped back. Good, she said. There he is, the monster under the crown. I was starting to think you'd lost him. I didn't lose him. I just stopped letting him make all my decisions. He's the only part of you worth keeping. Then you never knew me at all. They clashed again. Blade on blade, the sound echoing in the empty throne room. All the guards were dead. All the assassins were dead. Just the two of them. The architects of empire, fighting over what it should be. Above them, the ceiling cracked. Structural damage from the earlier explosions, stone groaning, ready to collapse. Neither of them cared. Why her? Cyrillith demanded between strikes. What does she give you that I couldn't? She sees me as human, not as king, not as symbol, just as a man trying to be better than what he was made, and that's enough? That's worth throwing away everything we built? Yes. The admission cost something. He could feel it, the final severing of what they'd been. Cyrillith's face twisted. Actual emotion now. Rage, pain, betrayal. I gave you everything. My mind, my body, my soul. I made you into what you are. And you throw it away for sentiment. You made me into what you needed, not what I wanted to be. You didn't know what you wanted. You were a survivor. I gave you purpose. You gave me a cage. Their blades locked again. But this time neither could break free. Matched, equal. Everything they'd learned, everything they'd become, distilled into this moment. Above them the ceiling groaned louder, cracks spreading, chunks of stone falling. We're going to die here, Cyrillith said. Both of us. Under the weight of what we built. Maybe. Is that what you want? Mutual destruction? No. I want you to see that there's another way. That power doesn't have to eat everything it touches. Show me. Let go. Walk away. Prove that you're more than what the Empire made you. Her eyes searched his, looking for the lie, the manipulation. Found none. Because there wasn't one. He genuinely meant it, wanted her to survive, to transform, to become something other than the perfect weapon the Empire had forged. I can't, she whispered. Don't know how. Then I'm sorry. He broke the lock, not with strength, with technique she'd taught him. A twist, a pivot. Her blade went wide. His blade went through her guard, into her chest, between ribs, through her heart. She froze, looked down at the steel protruding from her body, looked up at him. Well played. Blood bubbled from her lips. Violor. He held her as she fell, lowered her to the marble, his hands red with her blood. I'm sorry, he said, for all of it. She smiled, fading. Don't be. You chose. That's more than most kings ever do, even if you chose wrong. I didn't choose wrong. Ask me again in 100 years. When the Empire is dust and your ideals are forgotten, then we'll see. Her eyes went distant, focusing on something beyond him. Do you think? She stopped, the question unfinished, the answer lost. Cyrillith, Queen of the Empire, Architect of Fear, died in the throne room she'd helped build, and Vaelor held her. This woman who'd shaped him, challenged him, made him into what he'd been and fought what he'd become. She wasn't wrong about everything. Fear did work. Control did create stability. The old ways had preserved the Empire for generations, but they'd also hollowed out everyone who participated, turned humans into functions, made survival the only value worth protecting. He'd traded that for uncertainty, for the messy, dangerous possibility that people could choose better if given the chance. Now he'd find out if he'd been right, or if Cyrillith would be proven correct posthumously. The ceiling collapsed. Stone fell like rain. massive chunks of marble and gold, the throne room, symbol of everything the empire had been, coming down around him. He ran, through the dust, through the falling debris, toward the west exit. A support column crashed down, blocked the path. He reversed, went east. That door was buried in rubble, trapped. The thought should have terrified him, should have triggered every survival instinct 20 years of ruling had sharpened. Instead, he felt calm. Not resignation, just acceptance. He'd made his choices, faced his demons, tried to build something better. If it ended here, at least it ended honestly. A hand grabbed his arm. Thrace, covered in dust, bleeding from a dozen cuts, but alive. This way. The general pulled him through a gap in the rubble, into a servant's passage. Narrow, dark, but intact. They ran through corridors filling with smoke. Behind them, the throne room's destruction echoed, the heart of the empire, literally collapsing. They emerged into the courtyard, chaos, buildings burning, people running, guards trying to maintain order, nobles fleeing with whatever they could carry. And in the center of it, Naira, organizing, directing, saving. She saw him, covered in blood, limping, but alive, ran to him. Is she dead? Naira's face showed relief. Then something else. Not quite guilt, but awareness of what that relief cost. The throne room? Gone. The whole eastern wing is collapsing. Then we need to evacuate. Now. She started issuing orders. Reich and his people moving to assist. Alara's faction helping coordinate. The fragile alliance holding under pressure. This is what the new empire looked like. Not perfect, not orderly, but functional. People from different backgrounds, different loyalties, different visions, working together because the alternative was everyone dying. Vailor watched it. This thing he'd gambled everything on, taking shape in the chaos. Your Majesty. Lord Varen approached, soot-covered, exhausted, but standing. The council survived, most of us. We're ready to begin reconstruction as soon as the fires are out. Not reconstruction. Rebuilding. Isn't that the same thing? No. Reconstruction means putting it back the way it was. Rebuilding means creating something new from the pieces. Varen studied him, then nodded slowly. Then let's rebuild. The fires burned through the night. By dawn, half the palace was gone. The throne room, the council chambers, the old guard barracks, all the symbols of the empire that had been. But the people's quarter was saved. The markets, the homes, the places where actual life happened instead of power being performed. Vailor stood on what remained of the war balcony, watching the sun rise over a city that had survived. Barely. Bloodied. Changed. But surviving. Nira found him there. They counted the dead. 47 guards. 23 civilians. 12 nobles. And Cyrilith's assassins. Could have been worse. Could have been better. She stood beside him, silent, sharing the weight. What happens now? Now we do what we promised. Rebuild. Include voices that were never heard. Create systems that don't require people to become monsters to participate. You make it sound easy. It won't be. Every day will be a fight. Between the old way and the new way. Between fear and trust. Between what worked and what might work better. And you think we can win that fight? I think we have to try. Behind them, the city stirred. People emerging from shelters. Surveying damage. Beginning the slow work of recovery. This is what empire looks like, Vailor thought. Not marble halls and gold thrones. Not perfect order and absolute control. Just people. Choosing, every day, to build something together instead of tearing each other apart. It was messy, inefficient, uncertain, but it was real. And maybe real was stronger than perfect. Maybe humanity was stronger than fear. Maybe the explosion came from the north. Massive. Bigger than anything from the night before. The ground shook. Buildings swayed. Vailor grabbed the railing, looked. A mushroom of fire and smoke rose from the northern district, where they'd relocated the armory, where they'd stored the remaining weapons and powder, where hundreds of people were sheltering. No. He ran, downstairs, through corridors, out into the street. Thrace met him. The armory, Someone set charges, killed the guards, detonated the whole stockpile. Sarilith's people? We don't know. But sire, there's more. What? 3 other explosions, simultaneously. Water treatment, food storage, the civilian hospital. Someone's finishing what she started. Or there was always more than one player in this game. Valor's mind raced, processing, calculating, trying to find the pattern. Then he saw it. The explosions weren't random. They were strategic, targeting the new alliance's strongest points, the places where people from different factions were working together. This wasn't Sarilith's plan. This was something else. Someone who wanted the alliance to fail, who benefited from chaos. A figure emerged from the smoke, tall, armored, carrying the banner of House Mordrin, but not Alara. Her brother, the one everyone thought died in the Purge 15 years ago. Alive, armed, leading an army through the northern gate, and beside him, wearing the colors of 3 different rebel provinces, commanders Valor recognized. Davin, the Eastern Lords, the ones who'd supposedly agreed to negotiate. All of them, together, coordinated. Alara appeared at Valor's side. Her face went white. Kael, my brother. He was supposed to be dead. So was she, according to official records. The realization hit like a hammer. This had never been about Sarilith. She was just the opening move. The real trap was bigger, older, deeper. Kael raised his sword. His voice carried across the courtyard. King Valor Draven, you killed our family, stole our throne, built your empire on our blood. Now you will answer for it. Behind him, the army advanced. Thousands, maybe more, flooding through the breached gates. And Valor stood at the center of a burning city, with half his forces dead, his defenses shattered, his allies uncertain. Facing the consequence he'd always known would come. You can't kill the past. You can only delay it. And his past had just arrived with an army. Naira gripped his hand. What do we do? He looked at her, at Thrace, at the fragments of the alliance they'd built, at the city burning around them, at the army coming to destroy everything. And he smiled. Not because he had a plan, not because he saw a way to win, but because for the first time in his life he was facing the monster he'd made without pretending to be anything other than what he was. A man, flawed, bloodied, trying to be better than his worst choices. We fight. Against those odds? Against any odds. Why? Because some things are worth dying for. And this, he gestured to the people behind them, the alliance, the possibility. This is one of them. The army charged, and Valor Draven, king of nothing but his choices, raised his blade to meet them. Not because he would win, but because surrender was worse than death, and transformation was worth any price, even the final one. The first wave hit like a tidal force of steel and rage. Kael's army poured through the breached northern gate, disciplined, furious, carrying 15 years of hatred sharpened into purpose. These weren't conscripts or mercenaries. These were believers. People who'd grown up on stories of the Mordrin Purge, who'd been taught that Valor Draven was the monster that needed killing, and they weren't wrong. Valor met them in this courtyard with what remained of his forces, maybe 300 fighters, Palace Guard, Naira's Northerners, Alara's faction, the fragile alliance that had barely survived Sarilith's assault now facing an army 10 times their size. The math was simple. They would lose. But mathematics had never accounted for what humans become when they stop fighting for survival and start fighting for meaning. Valor's blade took the first attacker through the throat, pivoted, blocked, struck again, his body moving with the terrible efficiency of someone who'd killed so many times the act had become reflex. Beside him, Thrace fought like the war machine he'd always been. No wasted movement, no hesitation, just systematic destruction of anything that came within reach. Naira moved like wildfire through the enemy ranks, fast, unpredictable, her blade finding gaps, exploiting weaknesses, turning their numbers against them by forcing them into tight spaces where skill mattered more than mass. And Alara, sweet vengeance. Alara fought her own brother's soldiers with a fury that spoke of betrayal deeper than anything political. Family turning on family, blood against blood, the oldest wound. They held the courtyard for 10 minutes, then 15, then 20, Not because they were winning, because they refused to break. That's the thing about transformation. It doesn't make you invincible. It makes you willing to die for something that matters more than dying, and that willingness creates a kind of strength that superior numbers can't quite overcome. Until they can. A spear took Thrace in the side. Deep. The old general went down hard. Vaelor fought his way to him, stood over his oldest friend while enemies pressed from all sides. Get up. Can't. Blood bubbled from Thrace's lips. The spear had found something vital. Lung, maybe. Liver. Something you didn't survive. Go. Save yourself. Not leaving you. You have to. The Empire needs to learn that some things don't get sacrificed anymore. Vaelor grabbed Thrace's armor, dragged him backward, toward the palace. Every step contested, every foot paid for in blood. Reich appeared, the massive northerner taking position over them. Get him inside. I'll hold here. You can't hold alone. Watch me. The big man's blade swept in an arc that sent 3 attackers stumbling back. Bought them seconds. Vaelor pulled Thrace through the palace doors, into the main hall, lowered him against a pillar. The general's breathing was ragged, wet. Time measured in minutes now. Proud of you, Thrace whispered. The man you became, worth dying for. You're not dying. Don't lie. Not to me, not at the end. Vaelor gripped his hand. This man who'd stood beside him through everything, who'd questioned him, challenged him, but never abandoned him. What do I do? Win, not the battle. The transformation. Prove that changing is possible even when it costs everything. Outside, the sounds of fighting intensified. Screams, steel, the wet sounds of bodies hitting stone. Thrace's eyes focused past Vaelor, seeing something beyond. Not so bad. Dying for something true. His hand went slack. And Vaelor sat there, covered in his friend's blood, while the empire he'd tried to transform collapsed around him. There's a moment in every great change where you face the cost. Not the theoretical cost, the actual price, the people you lose, the pieces of yourself that die so something new can be born. This was that moment. Thrace gone. The alliance fracturing, the city burning, everything he'd gambled on reduced to ash and blood. He should have felt despair, should have broken under the weight of it. Instead, he felt clarity, not the false clarity of certainty, the real clarity that comes when you've lost everything except purpose, when all the noise falls away and you're left with the essential question, what are you willing to become to create the world you believe in? He stood, walked to the balcony overlooking the courtyard. Below, his people were being overwhelmed, pushed back step by step, dying, not because they were weak, because the enemy was too strong. Kael stood in the center of his army, untouched, waiting, his eyes locked on Vaelor. This was always how it would end. The two of them, the killer and the killed, the past and the attempt at a future. Vaelor walked down the stairs, through his retreating forces, into the space between the armies. Both sides paused, the moment stretching. He faced Kael across 20 feet of blood-soaked stone. Up close, the resemblance to Alara was striking. Same eyes, same sharp features, same fire burning underneath. But where Alara had chosen to build, Kael had chosen to destroy. You came for revenge. Kael's voice was ice and iron. I came for justice. Justice would be a trial. This is just murder with better publicity. You don't get to lecture me about murder. You killed my entire family. I did. I won't deny it, won't justify it. It was the choice I made to prevent civil war, and it was wrong. The admission rippled through both armies, a king confessing fault, unheard of. Kael's jaw worked. You think saying sorry makes it better? No. Nothing makes it better. But pretending I was right makes it worse. Then die knowing you were wrong. Kael drew his blade. Beautiful, perfectly balanced, marked with symbols of House Mordrin. Vaelor raised his own sword. Notched, stained, the weapon of someone who'd survived through pragmatism, not nobility. Before we do this, one question. What? Alara joined me. Chose to build instead of destroy. Why didn't you? Because she's weak. Because she fell for the same lies you're selling everyone else. That change is possible. That people can be better. That the Empire can transform without burning down first. And you don't believe that. I know it's not true. I spent 15 years watching, waiting, planning, and every year I saw the same thing. Power corrupts. Systems resist change. The only way to create something new is to destroy what was completely. Maybe you're right. Kale's eyes narrowed. Then why fight me? Because I have to try. Because giving up means you were right, and I'm not ready to accept that humanity is just an endless cycle of violence and revenge. Then you'll die a fool. Better than living as a monster. They charged. The impact of their blades rang across the courtyard like a bell tolling. Both armies watched. This wasn't just combat. This was judgment, past versus future, fear versus hope. Kale fought with precision. Every strike calculated. No wasted energy. The product of 15 years spent perfecting the art of killing one specific person. Veilor fought with experience. Decades of survival, dirty tricks, adaptability. The accumulated wisdom of someone who'd faced death so many times it had become familiar. They were evenly matched, which meant the fight would come down to will. Who wanted victory more? Who was willing to pay the higher price? Kale's blade opened a cut across Veilor's chest. Not deep, but bleeding. For my father. Another cut. Shoulder this time. For my mother. Across the thigh. For my brothers. Each wound a name. Each name a ghost. Veilor didn't defend, just took them, accepting the debt, until Kyle went for the killing blow. Then Veilor moved, fast, desperate, his blade catching Kyle's wrist, twisting, the younger man's sword clattering to the stone. Veilor's blade went to Kyle's throat, both of them frozen. The fight over. The outcome decided. Do it, Kyle said. Prove me right. Show everyone that when it comes down to it, you're still the same monster. I am the same monster. That's the point. Then kill me. No. Veilor lowered his blade. The courtyard went silent. Both armies stunned. You want revenge? Fine. I'll give you something better. The truth. In front of everyone. No spin. No justification. He turned to face the assembled forces. 15 years ago, I murdered the Mordrin family. 7 people, including children. I told myself it was necessary, that preventing civil war required terrible choices, that a king has to be willing to do monstrous things. His voice carried across the silence. I was wrong, not about the civil war threat, that was real, but about the solution. I chose the easiest path, the one that required the least imagination. Kill the problem, eliminate the threat, rule through fear. He looked at Kyle, and it worked. For 20 years, that approach worked. The empire was stable, prosperous, powerful, built on a foundation of bodies and the willingness to add more whenever necessary. Pause. But working isn't the same as right, and stability isn't the same as justice. I created an empire where the only way to succeed was to become what I was, ruthless, calculating, willing to sacrifice anyone for the greater good. He gestured to the ruins around them. That empire is dying. Not because enemies destroyed it, because I did. Because I finally understood that a system built on fear can't transform. It can only replicate itself until it collapses under the weight of its own cruelty. Kyle stood, picked up his sword, but didn't attack. Pretty speech changes nothing. You're right, words are cheap. So here's action. I abdicate. The throne is yours. House Mordrin restored. Take it, rule it, do better than I did. The courtyard erupted. Nobles shouting, generals demanding explanation. Both armies confused. Nira pushed through the crowd. You can't just give up. I'm not giving up. I'm accepting consequences. Kyle's right. I don't get to murder his family and keep the throne. Justice requires price. This isn't justice. This is suicide. Maybe. But it's honest suicide. He turned back to Kyle. So what do you choose? Take the throne? Kill me anyway? Or find a third option none of us have seen yet? Kael's face showed the war happening inside. 15 years of planning, hatred, purpose, all of it leading to this moment. And the moment not delivering what he'd expected. Alara stepped forward, approached her brother carefully. Kael, listen to me. I was where you are, ready to destroy everything to balance the scales. But revenge doesn't heal. It just makes you into what you hate. You betrayed our family. I chose a different path. One that might actually create the world our parents wanted instead of just avenging their deaths. They would be ashamed of you. Maybe. But I can live with their disappointment better than I can live with becoming him. She gestured to Valor. Not the man he is now. The man he was. The one who thought power justified anything. We have a chance to break that cycle, to show that transformation is possible. Kael looked at his sister, at Valor, at the armies waiting for direction, and Valor saw it. The exact moment where the future balanced on a blade's edge, where one choice would determine if the past repeated or if something new became possible. The young man's shoulders sagged, just slightly, the weight of 15 years released. I don't forgive you. I don't deserve forgiveness. And I don't trust you. You shouldn't, but... Kael sheathed his sword. But Ilara's right. Killing you just makes me another version of you, and I'm tired of being shaped by what you did. He turned to his army. Stand down. The war is over. Confusion rippled through the ranks. They'd come for vengeance, been promised blood. Commander, we fought for justice, Kael said. Real justice means building something better, not just destroying what was. So that's what we do. We help rebuild. We create the empire our family would have wanted. Slowly, weapons lowered, the army that had come to destroy choosing to create instead. But not everyone agreed. Lord Davin pushed forward, the Eastern Lord who'd played every side. This is madness. The king admits to murder and you let him live? What kind of justice is that? The complicated kind, Ilara said, the kind that recognizes no one here is innocent. We've all done terrible things in the name of necessity. The question is whether we keep doing them or choose differently. Davin's hand went to his sword. I didn't come here to rebuild. I came here to take what's mine. And there it was. The real threat. Not Kael seeking justice. Davin seeking power. The Lord's forces, maybe 1,000 men, separated from Kael's army, formed their own line. Valor sighed, picked up his sword again. There's always one more. Not one more. Several more. 3 other provincial lords joined Davin. The opportunists. The ones who'd seen the chaos as a chance to grab territory, resources, influence. They'd never cared about justice. Just advantage. Davin pointed his blade at Valor. You're weak, broken. Your empire is rubble. Your force is scattered. This is where it ends. Probably. Then surrender. Make this easy. When have I ever made anything easy? The Eastern Lord smiled. Good. I prefer it hard. His forces charged. But this time something different happened. Kael's army didn't stand aside. They moved to intercept. Positioned themselves between Davin and Valor. The young Mordrin walked to Valor's side. I said, I don't forgive you, don't trust you, but I'll be damned if I let opportunists use my family's tragedy for their own gain. Why? Because this isn't about you anymore. It's about whether we're going to keep eating each other or build something that lasts. Valor looked at this young man who had every reason to hate him, who'd chosen principle over revenge. Your parents would be proud, don't push it, but Kael smiled, slight, genuine. The combined forces met Davin's charge, and this time the math was different. Kael's discipline, Naira's ferocity, the palace guard's training, Ilara's tactical brilliance. Not superior numbers, superior purpose. The fight was brutal, close, desperate, but the outcome was inevitable. Davin fell to Kael's blade, the Eastern Lord dying with shock on his face, unable to understand how he'd miscalculated, because he'd thought this was still about power, about who was strongest, who was most ruthless. He'd missed that the rules had changed, that a critical mass of people had decided there was something more important than winning. His remaining forces surrendered, broken, leaderless, and the courtyard fell silent again. The battle was over. Actually, over. No more enemies emerging from the smoke, no more surprises. Just exhaustion, blood. The slow realization that they'd survived. Valor sat on the steps of the palace, every wound throbbing, his body reminding him he wasn't young anymore, wasn't invincible, was just a man who'd taken too much damage and kept standing anyway. Nira sat beside him, her hand finding his. We did it? Did what? Lost half the palace, most of our forces, any pretense of stability, but we're alive, and we proved change is possible. Did we? Or did we just prove that chaos is inevitable? She leaned her head on his shoulder. Ask me again tomorrow. When we've slept, when the bodies are buried, when we start the actual work of rebuilding. What if I don't have answers tomorrow either? Then we figure it out together. That's the whole point. The sun rose over the ruins of the capital, light touching stone that had stood for centuries and stone that had fallen overnight. The empire Valor had built was gone, the throne room destroyed, the symbols of absolute power reduced to rubble. But the people remained, battered, traumatized, but choosing to stay, choosing to build. That's the thing about true transformation. It doesn't happen in grand moments. It happens in 1,000 small choices. Every person deciding whether to seek revenge or justice, whether to grab power or share it, whether to rebuild what was or create what could be. Alara approached, helped Valor to his feet. The council is gathering, what's left of it. They want to discuss succession. I meant what I said. The throne is Kael's if he wants it. Kael appeared behind his sister. I don't want it. Never did. I wanted justice, acknowledgement, but not that cage. Then who? We all do. Together. Valor studied them. Brother and sister. Enemies turned allies. The future of House Mordrin. You're suggesting what? Shared rule? I'm suggesting we stop pretending one person can carry the weight of an empire. We distribute it. Create a real council. With actual power. Where decisions require consensus instead of royal decree. That's not how empires work. Then maybe we build something that isn't an empire. The words hung in the morning air. A kingdom without a king. Power without absolute authority. Government by collaboration instead of decree. It sounded insane, impossible, destined to collapse into chaos. But so had every great change in history before people tried it. Valor looked at Naira, at Kael, at Alara, at the faces of people who'd chosen to stay when they could have fled, who'd fought when they could have surrendered. All right, let's try. Just like that? Just like that. Because I've spent 20 years doing it the other way. And look where that got us. He gestured to the ruins. Can't be worse than this. The council gathered in what remained of the Great Hall. Nobles, merchants, military commanders, representatives from provinces that had been enemies yesterday. Valor stood before them, not on a throne, just standing, eye level. I hereby dissolve the monarchy, effective immediately. Gasps, protests, confusion. He raised his hand. The empire as it was is dead. What comes next we build together. Equal voices, shared power, decisions made by consensus instead of decree. This is madness, Lord Varen said. Someone has to lead. Someone has to make final calls. Why? Because that's how it works. That's how it worked. Past tense. We're trying something new, and when we can't agree, when decisions need to be made quickly, then we'll fail. And learn, and try again. The same way humans have always progressed. Not through perfect systems, through iteration, experimentation, the willingness to be wrong and adjust. Lady Mareth stood. I'll support this. On one condition. That you remain, not as king, as advisor. Your experience matters even if your authority doesn't. Others nodded, slowly, tentatively, not universal support, but enough, a critical mass willing to try. Kael spoke. House Mordrin will participate, will contribute our resources to rebuilding, but we want representation for the outer provinces, the ones who've never had voice in the capital. Granted. Nira added, the northern territories too. We're tired of being treated like barbarians. We have knowledge, skills, perspectives that matter. Agreed. Province by province, faction by faction. The new structure took shape, not perfect, not clean, but real, messy, human. The kind of system that might actually survive because it didn't require anyone to be perfect. Just committed. They worked through the day, into the night, drafting frameworks, arguing details, finding compromises. And Valor watched, participated when asked, but mostly just witnessed, this thing being born from the ashes of everything he'd destroyed. He should have felt grief, loss. The end of his rule, his power, his identity as king. Instead, he felt relief. Because for the first time in 20 years, the weight wasn't entirely on him. The burden was shared, the responsibility distributed. He was just a man again, flawed, limited, but free. 3 months later, the first true council convened, 47 representatives. From every province, every major faction, elected by their people instead of appointed by royal decree. They met in a new hall, built from the rubble of the old throne room, simple, functional. No throne, just a circular table where every seat was equal. Vailor attended, not as ruler, as citizen. His voice, one among many. It was chaos. Beautiful, frustrating, human chaos. Debates that went in circles. Compromises that satisfied no one completely. Decisions that took days instead of minutes. And slowly, painfully, it started to work. Not because it was efficient, because it was legitimate. People followed decisions they'd participated in making, even when they disagreed, even when the outcome wasn't what they wanted. That's the thing about shared power. It's slower, messier, more complicated. But it's also more resilient, because no single point of failure can bring it down. Vailor and Nira walked through the rebuilt markets one evening. The city had recovered faster than anyone expected, not to what it was, to something different, more organic, less imposed. You did it, Nira said. Changed the empire. We did it. And we didn't change it. We destroyed it and helped build something else from the pieces. Semantics. Important semantics. Change implies the same thing evolving. This was death and rebirth. They passed vendors selling goods from a dozen provinces, heard languages that used to mean enemy, saw people who'd fought each other months ago trading peacefully. Not perfect. There were still tensions, still disputes, still people who wanted the old ways back. But the trajectory was different, pointed toward inclusion instead of domination, toward collaboration instead of control. Do you regret it? Nira asked. Giving up the throne? Every day. Really? No. But I'm supposed to say that to sound deep and conflicted. She hit his arm, laughing. I'm serious, though. You walked away from absolute power. Most people spend their whole lives climbing toward what you abandoned. Most people never understand that absolute power is absolute prison. The higher you climb, the less human you're allowed to be. I spent 20 years in that cage. I'm done. So what now? Now we live. Just live. As people. Not symbols. Not functions. Just flawed humans trying to be better than we were. That's it? After everything, your grand plan is just to be human? Just being human is the hardest thing we can do. Everything else is hiding from it. They walked in silence for a while, the city alive around them. Imperfect, messy, real. Valor thought about Thrace, about Sarilith, about everyone he'd lost along the way. They'd died for this. Not for victory, not for empire. For the possibility that change was real, that humans could choose differently, that the cycles of violence and revenge could be broken. He hoped they'd been right, wouldn't know for years, maybe decades, whether this experiment survived, whether shared power could last, whether humanity was capable of the sustained effort required to govern collectively. But they were trying. That had to count for something. A year passed, then two. The new system held. Barely. Through disputes and challenges and moments where collapse seemed inevitable. But it held. Provinces that had fought for independence chose to participate. Not because they were forced, because they had actual voice, actual stake in decisions. Trade flourished. Not through imperial decree, but through voluntary exchange. People discovering that cooperation served self-interest better than domination. And slowly, the story changed. Not the official history, that would take generations, but the lived story, the one people told their children, about how the empire that ruled through fear died, and something new grew from its ashes, something that required more from everyone but gave back more too. Vailor lived quietly in a house on the edge of the capital, not hiding, just not seeking attention. He advised when asked, participated in council sessions, voted like any other citizen. But mostly, he just lived. With Nira, building a life that wasn't defined by power or duty or the weight of empire. It should have felt small, diminished. After ruling millions, instead, it felt enormous. Free. Real in a way ruling had never been. Because sovereignty over yourself is harder than sovereignty over others, requires constant choice, constant recommitment, constant growth. He traded an empire for a life, and discovered the life was worth more. One evening, 5 years after the dissolution, Alara visited. She'd become one of the council's most effective voices, bringing people together, finding compromises, building bridges, everything her family had been before Valor destroyed them. "We need to talk," she said. "About?" "Forgiveness." Valor's chest tightened. "I told you, I don't expect—" "Not my forgiveness, yours." "What?" She sat across from him, tired, carrying the weight of leadership he knew too well. "You've spent 5 years punishing yourself, living quietly, refusing to take credit for what you started, acting like you don't deserve to participate fully because of what you did. I don't. That's not your call. The people you wronged get to decide if you've paid enough. And Kyle and I, we've decided. Decided what? That you've suffered enough. That you've changed enough. That holding your past against you forever serves no one. I killed your family. I know. And you've spent 5 years proving you're not that person anymore. You gave up power, helped build something better, lived by the principles you espoused instead of just talking about them. That doesn't erase— nothing erases it. But redemption isn't about erasure, it's about becoming someone different, someone who wouldn't make those choices again. How can you know that? I can't, but I can see evidence, watch actions, make judgments based on what you do instead of what you did. She stood. So here's what I'm offering, not forgiveness, that's too simple, but release from the weight of carrying it alone. You did terrible things. You've worked to make amends. That's enough. Not perfect, but enough. Valor's eyes stung. Emotion he'd kept locked down for 5 years threatening to surface. Why? Because someone has to break the cycle. Someone has to say the debt is paid. Otherwise, we just pass trauma down forever. And I'm tired of being defined by what was done to me. She left him sitting there, with the possibility of something he'd thought impossible. Not redemption, just the permission to be human again. Fully, without the weight of past choices crushing every present moment. It took him 3 days to accept it. 3 days of arguing with himself, of listing reasons why he didn't deserve release, why he should carry the weight forever, until Naira sat him down and said something that cut through it all. You're not the only one who gets hurt by you punishing yourself forever. I'm trying to build a life with you. And I can't do that with the ghost of who you were. I need the man who's here now, present, whole, not half disappeared into guilt. What if I don't know how to be that? Then we figure it out. Like we figure out everything else. Together. Imperfectly. But actually living instead of just existing. He looked at her. This woman who'd crashed into his life and refused to let him hide behind the crown. Okay. Just okay? Just okay. I'll try. To forgive myself. To be present. To live like I deserve the life I'm building. She kissed him. Deep. Real. That's all I ask. 10 years passed. The new system wasn't perfect. There were scandals, corruption, failures. But it held. And more importantly, it adapted. When problems emerged, they were addressed. Not by royal decree, but by collective action. The provinces that had rebelled were the most integrated, not through conquest, but through proven value. They'd participated, contributed, benefited. And slowly, the idea spread beyond the empire's old borders. Other kingdoms watched, saw that shared power didn't mean chaos, saw that people could govern themselves with proper structures. Some tried it, some failed, some succeeded. But the possibility existed. That's what mattered. The proof that absolute monarchy wasn't the only option, that humans could organize differently. Valor was old now, gray in his beard, lines marking his face, the wounds from 1,000 battles aching in cold weather, but alive. Still married to Naira, still participating in the council when his perspective mattered, still learning, still growing. One afternoon, Kyle visited. The young Mordrin was a council leader now, respected, effective. They sat on Valor's porch, watching the city move below. I wanted to thank you. For what? Killing your family? Kale smiled, comfortable enough now to find dark humor in it, for showing me that revenge isn't the same as justice. That transformation is possible even for monsters. That the measure of a person isn't their worst moment, but their willingness to become better. I didn't show you that. You chose it. With your example. Watching you give up power, admit fault, live differently, it made me believe change was real. They sat in silence. Two men shaped by violence, connected by tragedy, choosing to build instead of destroy. The Empire needs a history, Kyle said, an official one, for the archives. The Council wants you to write it. Why me? Because you lived it. Made the hardest choices. Can explain not just what happened, but why. The thinking behind decisions, the costs. And if I write it honestly, if I don't make myself look good, that's exactly why it should be you. Valor considered. A lifetime of choices, mistakes, growth. All of it condensed into words for people who'd never lived it. I'll do it, on one condition. What? We include other voices. Cerilith's perspective, Thrace's, Naira's, everyone who shaped what happened. Not just my version, the full, complicated truth. Agreed. He spent the next 3 years writing, not propaganda, not justification, just honest accounting, the choices that seemed right at the time, the ones that haunted him, the slow realization that power without humanity was just elaborate cruelty, and the journey towards something better, not perfect, but better. When he finished, they published it, made it available to anyone who wanted to read. It caused controversy. Some said he was too hard on himself, some said he wasn't hard enough, some said it was all lies, some said it was too true. But people read it, discussed it, used it to understand how systems change, how people change, how the two are connected, and that's all history can do. Give context. Provide evidence. Let future generations learn from past mistakes without having to make them all again. 15 years after the dissolution, Vialor was dying. Not dramatically, not in battle, just age. The body finally giving up after decades of abuse. He lay in bed in his home, Naira beside him, holding his hand. Elara visited. Kael. Council members. People whose lives he'd shaped for better and worse. They told him the Empire, the new one, was thriving, growing, adapting, that his work had mattered. He smiled, tired, ready. It wasn't my work. It was ours, everyone who chose to try something different. Still, you started it. I destroyed the old thing. You all built the new one. There's a difference. His breathing was shallow now. Time measured in minutes. Naira leaned close. Any regrets? Thousands. Name one. Not doing this sooner, not trusting that people could handle freedom earlier. You did what you could when you could. Did I? Or did I hold on to power longer than necessary because I was afraid? Does it matter? You let go eventually. That's what counts. He closed his eyes, thinking of everyone who'd died along the way. Thrace, Cerilith, the Mordrin family, countless others, all of them paying prices for choices he'd made. Tell them, he whispered, future generations. Tell them that power is a trap, that the higher you climb, the less human you become. That real strength is having the courage to step down when you should, instead of clinging until you're torn down. We'll tell them. And tell them, his voice was fading. Tell them that transformation is possible. For people, for systems, for everything. But it requires sacrifice, humility, the willingness to destroy what you built when it's wrong. We will. And one more thing. Anything. Tell them I'm sorry for what I did, what I was, what I took from people. Sorry doesn't fix it. But it's true. His breathing stopped. And Valor Draven, once king, once tyrant, once monster, died as just a man. Flawed. Complicated. But changed. They buried him without ceremony. In a simple grave, no throne to mark it. No empire, just his name and dates. Lived, ruled, learned, changed. That's all any life can claim. The city mourned, not as subjects mourning a king, as citizens mourning a person who'd mattered, and then they moved on, back to the work of governing, of building, of creating the future. Because that's the thing about real transformation. It doesn't end when the transformer dies. It continues, grows, adapts. The system Valor helped create outlasted him, evolved past him, became something he probably wouldn't fully recognize. But that was the point. He'd built a cage and called it Empire, then destroyed it and helped build something that could grow beyond its builder. That's the measure of real change, not whether it's perfect, whether it's alive, whether it continues to evolve long after you're gone. Nira lived another decade, carrying their story, helping people understand the journey from empire to republic, from fear to trust. When she died, they buried her beside him. Two people who'd chosen each other, and in choosing, had helped an empire choose differently too. The graves became a place people visited, not to worship, just to remember. That change is possible, that power can be released, that humans can choose better even when it costs everything, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is destroy what you built to create space for something you'll never fully see. 200 years later, the system held. Not unchanged, it had evolved, adapted, grown, but the core remained. Shared power, distributed authority, government by collaboration instead of decree. It wasn't utopia. There were still problems, corruption, inequality, challenges. But there was also accountability, the ability to change leaders without civil war, the space for dissent without death. And people chose it every day, through participation, through voting, through the small act of believing their voice mattered. That's Valor's legacy, not an empire, a possibility. The proof that humans can organize differently, that absolute power isn't necessary, that we can trust each other with freedom and create something that lasts. Not because one person was strong enough to impose it, but because enough people chose it and kept choosing it, generation after generation, imperfectly, messily, but actually doing it. And in some future, centuries beyond Valor's death, a young person will stand before his grave and read the words carved there, lived, ruled, learned, changed, and they'll understand what those words mean. That transformation is possible for anyone, for everyone, for entire civilizations, but only if you're willing to pay the price. Only if you're brave enough to destroy what you were to become what you need to be. Only if you understand that real power isn't dominating others. It's mastering yourself, and then releasing even that, becoming just human, flawed, temporary, limited, but free. And in that freedom, capable of anything, even building a world where others can be free too. That's the story, not of a king who conquered, but of a man who learned to let go. And in letting go, gave the world permission to be better than he was. That's all any of us can do. Be better than we were. Help others be better than we are. And trust that the future will continue the work. Imperfectly, but actually doing it. That's enough. That has to be enough. Because it's all we have and all we need, the end.